Victor DeLuca built an empire on fear, until a 2 a.m. call shattered everything. His ex-lover, the woman he destroyed with accusations and cruelty, is dying in labor with his child. Her rare blood type has one match in the entire city, him. The man who once threw Elena Hart into the rain now faces an impossible choice. Let her die, or become the only thing standing between her and death. Tonight, the most feared crime boss in the city will discover that some debts can only be paid in blood. Watch until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down like punishment. Victor DeLuca stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the storm turn the city into a drowning maze of neon and shadow. Lightning cracked the sky open, illuminating the empire he'd carved from violence and will. 32 floors below, his territory stretched in every direction. Clubs, docks, politicians, judges, all bound to him by fear or greed or both. His phone vibrated against the marble bar top. Victor didn't move. Calls at 2 in the morning meant blood, betrayal, or opportunity, sometimes all three. He let it ring twice more before crossing the room, his reflection ghosting across rain-streaked glass. Broad shoulders in a tailored shirt, dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and eyes that had forgotten how to soften. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. "Mr. DeLuca?" The voice was female, young, trembling slightly. "This is Mercy Hospital. You're listed as an emergency contact for Elena Hart." The name hit him like a blade between the ribs. Victor's hand tightened around the phone. "You have the wrong number." "Sir, please don't hang up." Desperation bled through her professional tone. "Ms. Hart is in critical labor. There are complications, severe hemorrhaging, and her blood type is extremely rare, a B negative. We've checked every blood bank within 200 miles. Victor said nothing. Outside, the storm screamed against the windows. "You're the only match we could locate in our system," the nurse continued, words tumbling faster now. "From a donation record 3 years ago. Sir, if we don't get a transfusion in the next 2 hours, we're going to lose both her and the baby." The baby. Victor's world tilted. "What baby?" Silence stretched like a chasm. "The infant, sir. Ms. Hart is 38 weeks pregnant. The child is yours. She has you listed as the father on her medical directive." The nurse's voice cracked. "Please, Mr. DeLuca, she's dying." Victor ended the call. He stood motionless in the center of his empire, phone still pressed to his ear, listening to dead air while his mind fractured into 1,000 razor-edged pieces. Elena. Pregnant. Dying. His child. A child he never knew existed. Fighting for life inside a woman he'd thrown away like she was nothing. The woman he'd destroyed. Thunder rolled across the sky like an executioner's drum. Victor moved. He grabbed his jacket, his keys, and was halfway to the elevator when his second-in-command, Marcus, appeared from the security office. "Boss, where are you?" "Not now." Victor's voice could have cut steel. Marcus blocked his path anyway. 20 years of loyalty had taught him when to push. "The storm's taken out half the grid. Streets are flooding. Whatever this is, send someone else." "Move." Something in Victor's face made Marcus step aside. "At least take Dimitri. Take someone." Victor was already in the elevator. "Handle things until I get back." The doors closed on Marcus's troubled expression. The parking garage smelled like concrete and rain. Victor's Bentley waited in its reserved spot, black and sleek and utterly useless in a flooding city. He bypassed it for the Range Rover, higher clearance, four-wheel drive, built for exactly this kind of chaos. The engine roared to life. Victor peeled out of the garage and into hell. The storm had transformed familiar streets into combat zones. Water surged across intersections, carrying debris and trash and entire tree branches in churning currents. Traffic lights swung wildly on their cables, casting red and green shadows across abandoned cars. Victor drove like he fought, ruthlessly, without hesitation, using every gap and advantage. His mind wouldn't stop spinning. Elena Hart. Real name. Elena Castellano, before she'd changed it, before she'd erased every trace of the life they'd shared, before he'd given her every reason to disappear. She'd been a graduate student when they met. 24 years old, brilliant, studying art history at the university his family funded. Victor had been 31, newly in control of his father's organization, drowning in blood feuds and succession wars. Elena had been light in his darkness, hope in his brutality, the one pure thing in a world built on corruption. He'd loved her with an intensity that terrified him. And when his enemies whispered that she was betraying him, feeding information to the feds, setting him up for a fall, Victor had believed them. The memory crashed over him with the force of the storm. Elena in their apartment, rain streaming down the windows just like tonight, her eyes wide with shock and hurt as Victor threw documents across the table, bank records, phone logs, meeting times that his paranoia had twisted into evidence. "You're working with them," he'd said, voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Federal agents. You've been feeding them information about my operations." "Victor, no! I would never! Don't lie to me!" He'd grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to terrify. "I have proof." "Whatever you think you have, it's wrong." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you. I would never betray you." Love. Victor had laughed, bitter and cruel. "You don't know what that word means. You're just like everyone else, trying to use me, destroy me, take what I've built. Please." She'd reached for him, desperate. "Just listen. Get out." Victor had released her wrist like it burned. "Get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. Victor, now!" She'd flinched, actually flinched, like he'd struck her. And then she'd grabbed her coat and run into the rain, and Victor had let her go, convinced he was protecting himself from betrayal. He'd been wrong. 2 weeks later, his security chief had discovered the truth. The evidence had been fabricated by a rival family trying to isolate Victor, to cut him off from anyone who might soften his ruthlessness. Elena had been innocent, completely, utterly innocent. By then, she'd vanished, changed her name, left the city, erased herself from his world. Victor had searched, of course he'd searched, but Elena had learned from the best how to disappear. He'd found nothing but dead ends and silence, and now she was dying, with his child. Victor slammed the accelerator down, hydroplaning through an intersection as the Range Rover's tires fought for purchase. Water sprayed 20 feet into the air. He didn't slow down. Mercy Hospital rose ahead like a beacon, 12 stories of concrete and glass with emergency lights glowing in the storm. The main entrance was chaos. Ambulances lined up 3 deep, paramedics shouting over the wind, patients on gurneys being rushed through automatic doors. Victor abandoned the Range Rover in a loading zone and ran. Inside, the hospital had descended into controlled panic. The lights flickered, backup generators struggling to compensate for the blackout. Nurses rushed past with equipment, doctors barked orders, and somewhere an alarm was screaming about a critical patient in distress. Victor grabbed the first nurse he saw. "Elena Hart. Where is she?" The young woman blinked at him, startled. "Sir, you can't just—" "Where is she?" "4th floor, labor and delivery, but—" Victor was already moving. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. 4th floor, labor and delivery. The words repeated in his mind like a prayer he didn't believe in. The 4th floor was worse than the lobby. The main lights were out, replaced by emergency strips that cast everything in sickly yellow. Medical staff moved with urgent efficiency, their faces tight with stress. Victor emerged into a hallway lined with delivery rooms, each one marked with a number and a status light. "Sir!" A security guard stepped into his path. "This is a restricted area." Victor didn't slow down. He simply moved around the man with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to physical confrontation, leaving the guard shouting protests behind him. Room 412. The status light burned red, critical. Through the small window, Victor could see them, 3 nurses and a doctor clustered around a bed, moving with the practiced urgency of people fighting for a life. Monitors beeped frantically. Someone called for medication. The doctor's gloved hands were stained dark with blood. And on the bed, barely visible through the forest of medical personnel, Elena. Victor's breath stopped. She was so pale. The vibrant woman he'd known had been replaced by this fragile creature lost in hospital gowns and wires. Her dark hair lay limp against the pillow, her face contorted in agony, An oxygen mask covered her nose and mouth, fogging with each labored breath. She was dying. Right there, right now, while he stood frozen on the other side of a door. "Mr. DeLuca?" The nurse from the phone appeared at his elbow, older than she'd sounded, with gray-streaked hair and exhausted eyes. "Thank God you came. We need to get you prepped immediately." "What's happening?" Victor couldn't tear his gaze from Elena. "What's wrong?" "Placental abruption. The placenta separated from the uterine wall. She's hemorrhaging internally. We need to do an emergency C-section, but she's lost too much blood already." The nurse was already pulling him down the hallway. "Her pressure's dangerously low. Without a transfusion, her heart could stop on the table." "Then give her blood." "We don't have her type. A B-negative is rare, less than 1% of the population. The blood banks are depleted because of the storm." They'd reached a prep room. The nurse thrust paperwork at him. "You need to sign consent forms. We'll take 2 units, maybe 3, depending on what she needs during surgery." Victor scanned the forms without reading them. "Take whatever you need." "Sir, you should understand the risks." "I said take what you need." He signed with savage strokes. "How long?" 20 minutes to screen and prep your blood. Then they'll take her to surgery." The nurse was already inserting an IV line into his arm with practiced efficiency. "You'll need to rest after—" "I'm not resting." "Mr. DeLuca, a 3-unit donation is significant. I don't care." Victor met her eyes with the full weight of his authority. "You'll do what needs to be done, and I'll be fine. Focus on her." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. She'd seen enough in her career to recognize when arguing was pointless. The next 20 minutes crawled by like hours. Victor sat in the prep room while machines extracted his blood, filling bag after bag with the dark red fluid that might keep Elena alive. Through the door, he could hear the organized chaos of the hospital, alarms, announcements, the constant rush of footsteps. And once, clear as a knife, Elena's scream. It cut through walls and distance and 3 years of silence. Victor's hands clenched on the arms of the chair, hard enough to make the metal creak. The nurse monitoring his donation looked at him with something like pity. "She's strong," the woman said quietly. "She's fighting." Victor said nothing. What was there to say? That he'd broken that strength 3 years ago? That he'd taken her fight and turned it against her until she had no choice but to run? The machines beeped. Another bag filled. "Mr. DeLuca?" A different voice. Victor looked up to find a surgeon in the doorway. Tall, gray-haired, with the kind of steady hands and calm eyes that came from decades in operating rooms. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I'll be performing Miss Hart's C-section." Victor stood. The nurse protested, but he ignored her. "Is she going to make it?" Dr. Chen's pause told him everything. "I'm going to do everything in my power to save both her and the baby. But you need to understand she's in critical condition. The hemorrhaging is severe. Even with the transfusion, there's significant risk." "What kind of risk?" "Cardiac arrest, stroke, organ failure." The doctor's voice was gentle but unflinching. "The baby's in distress as well. Prolonged oxygen deprivation. We won't know the extent of any damage until after delivery." Victor felt the floor shift beneath him. "Tell me the odds." "I don't deal in odds, Mr. DeLuca. I deal in possibilities." Dr. Chen glanced at the blood bags. "What you're doing right now, that's possibility. That's a fighting chance. The rest is up to her." The lights flickered. Somewhere in the hospital, a generator coughed. Dr. Chen's expression tightened. "We need to move now, before we lose more power." She turned to the nurse. "Get those bags to the OR. I want her prepped in 5 minutes." Everything happened fast after that. Medical staff materialized from hallways and offices, moving with the coordinated precision of a pit crew. Victor was released from the donation chair, dizzy, lighter, but driven by something far stronger than blood loss. He followed the organized chaos to the surgical wing, watching through observation windows as Elena was wheeled into the OR. They'd stripped away everything but her humanity. No jewelry, no makeup, no pretense. Just a woman fighting for her life and her child's life with every labored breath. The medical team surrounded her like armor, checking monitors, adjusting IVs. preparing instruments that gleamed under the surgical lights. Victor's blood hung from a pole beside her bed. "Sir, you can't be in here." A nurse tried to guide him out. "Family only in the observation. I am family." Victor's voice was granite. "I'm the father." The nurse looked at him, really looked, taking in the expensive clothes, the commanding presence, the dangerous edge that clung to him like cologne. She made a decision. "Observation room is through there. You can watch from behind the glass." Victor had commanded rooms filled with killers. He'd stared down men twice his size without flinching. He'd built an empire on the principle that he feared nothing and no one. But walking into that observation room, looking down at Elena's unconscious form through surgical glass, that took more courage than anything he'd ever done. Dr. Chen was already at work, her team moving in synchronized silence. A nurse administered anesthesia. Another monitored vitals. The surgeon's hands moved with confident precision, making the first incision while Victor's blood flowed into Elena's veins through clear tubing. "Pressure's climbing," someone announced. 80/40. "Keep pushing fluids," Dr. Chen ordered. "I need more suction here." Victor pressed against the glass, his breath fogging the surface. He could see Elena's face, still so pale, but perhaps less gray than before. The oxygen mask rose and fell with mechanical regularity. Monitors beeped their strange, urgent music. And then, a new sound. Wet, organic, the sound of flesh parting. "I'm through the uterine wall," Dr. Chen said, "preparing to deliver." Time stopped. Victor watched, unable to breathe, as the surgeon's hands disappeared into Elena's body and emerged holding something small and dark and covered in fluid. A nurse rushed forward with blankets. Dr. Chen lifted the baby clear, clamping and cutting the umbilical cord with swift efficiency. "It's a boy," she announced, and then silence. The baby didn't cry, didn't move, just hung limp in Dr. Chen's hands like a broken doll. "NICU team now!" The surgeon's calm shattered. "Infant's not breathing." Chaos exploded. A pediatric team appeared from nowhere, taking the baby to a warming table in the corner. Victor watched in horror as they worked, tiny compressions on a tiny chest, a breathing mask that covered the infant's entire face, desperate voices calling out vitals that meant nothing to him but clearly meant everything to them. "Come on, baby," one of the NICU nurses whispered. "Come on, fight!" And Elena, "We're losing her!" A nurse's shout cut through the room. "Pressure's dropping, 60/30. Damn it!" Dr. Chen was elbows deep in Elena's abdomen, working with frantic speed. "She's hemorrhaging again. I can't. There's too much blood." The monitors screamed. "Pressure's 40/20. She's crashing. Get me more blood, now!" But there was no more blood. Victor had given everything he could safely give. The bags hung empty beside Elena's bed, their contents already inside her, already not enough. Victor slammed his hand against the glass. "Use mine. Take more." No one heard him, or if they did, they were too busy trying to save a life to respond. "V-fib," someone shouted. "She's coding." The heart monitor's steady beep dissolved into a single, endless shriek. Dr. Chen grabbed the defibrillator. "Charging to 200! Clear!" Elena's body jerked on the table. The monitor kept screaming. "Again! Clear!" Another jolt, another failure. And in the corner, the NICU team worked with equal desperation on a baby who still hadn't drawn breath, whose tiny body remained terrifyingly still despite everything they did. Victor had thought he understood hell. He'd walked through blood, betrayal, and violence without flinching. He'd made choices that would haunt lesser men to their graves. But this, watching Elena die, watching his son die, separated from them by glass and rules, and the consequences of his own cruelty 3 years ago, this was a new kind of damnation. "Clear!" Dr. Chen's voice cracked with strain. The defibrillator discharged, Elena's body convulsed, and the monitor beeped, once, twice, weak and thready, but there. "We have sinus rhythm." A nurse's voice was ragged with relief. "Pressure's rising, 50/30, 60/35. "Keep it climbing," Dr. Chen ordered, already back to repairing the damage. "I need to close this bleeder before—" "Doctor!" The NICU nurse's shout cut through everything. "The baby." A new sound filled the OR. Thin, reedy, angry. The most beautiful sound Victor had ever heard. His son was crying. "Heart rate's good," the NICU nurse called out, laughing through obvious tears. "Apgar score climbing. He's pink. He's responsive. Get him stable into the NICU, doctor," Chen said without looking up from Elena. "I'm not done here." The pediatric team rushed out with the crying infant, leaving the surgical team to their desperate work. Victor sagged against the glass, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. Elena's heart was beating. His son was breathing, but Dr. Chen's grim expression suggested they weren't safe yet. Not even close. The surgery continued for another 90 minutes. Victor watched every second, his medical ignorance making the experience even more terrifying. He saw Dr. Chen's hands move with urgent precision, saw blood and tissue and things he couldn't identify, saw Elena's pressure climb and stabilize and then drop again, sending the team into another round of controlled panic, saw his blood, the blood he'd given, keeping her alive one heartbeat at a time. Finally, Dr. Chen stepped back from the table. "Close her up," she told her team. "Get her to recovery and monitor her closely. I want vitals every 15 minutes. She stripped off her gloves and mask and left the OR, emerging into the observation room where Victor waited. Her scrubs were stained dark with blood, Elena's blood, mixed with his. "She made it through surgery," Dr. Chen said without preamble. "But she's not out of danger. The next 24 hours are critical. She lost a tremendous amount of blood, and her body's been through extreme trauma. There could be complications, infection, clotting issues, organ damage from the hypotension." "But she's alive." Victor's voice was raw. "Yes, thanks largely to you." The doctor studied him with open curiosity. 3 units is a significant donation. You saved her life tonight, Mr. DeLuca." Victor shook his head. "I destroyed it 3 years ago. This is just debt." Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "The baby's in the NICU. He's small, 5 pounds, 2 ounces, and he had a rough start, but he's breathing on his own and his vitals are strong. You can see him if you'd like." A son. Victor had a son. The concept refused to feel real. "Can I see her first?" he asked. "Elena." "She's in recovery, unconscious, probably will be for several hours." Dr. Chen hesitated. "Mr. DeLuca, I don't know your relationship with Mrs. Hart, but there is no relationship." Victor's laugh was bitter. "I made sure of that." "Well?" The doctor gestured toward the hallway. "She's going to need someone when she wakes up. Someone who isn't trying to take her blood pressure or check her incision. Just think about that." She left him there, alone in the observation room, staring at the now empty OR. Victor's phone had buzzed 17 times during the surgery. He ignored it. Marcus and the Empire and everything else could wait. For the first time in 3 years, nothing mattered except this, except the woman in recovery and the child in the NICU, and the weight of everything he'd broken settling onto his shoulders like stones. The recovery room was quiet. Curtains divided the space into small cubicles, each one containing a patient and a forest of monitoring equipment. Elena was in the corner, as far from the nursing station as possible. Privacy, Victor realized. They'd given her privacy. He pulled aside the curtain and stopped breathing. She looked so small in the hospital bed. IVS ran into both arms. Monitors tracked her heart rate, her oxygen, her blood pressure. A drain tube snaked out from beneath the blankets, collecting fluids into a bag that Victor tried not to look at. Her face was still too pale, but there was color in her lips now, faint, but there. Victor pulled up a chair and sat beside her. He'd forgotten how beautiful she was. Time and distance had blurred his memories, turning Elena into an abstract concept, the woman he'd wronged, the ghost he couldn't escape. But here, real and breathing and fragile, she was devastatingly human. Her hand lay on top of the blanket, small and still. Victor reached for it, then stopped. He had no right. No right to touch her, to comfort himself with her warmth, to pretend the past 3 years hadn't happened. But he took her hand anyway. Her fingers were cold. Victor wrapped both his hands around hers, trying to transfer warmth, life, anything. Her pulse fluttered against his palm, weak but steady. "I'm sorry." he whispered. The words felt pathetic, inadequate. I'm so sorry, Elena, for everything. She didn't respond, didn't move. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm, measuring a life he'd almost lost tonight. You have a son, Victor continued, speaking to her unhearing ears because he needed to say it out loud, needed to make it real. He's small, but he's strong. He's fighting, just like you. Thunder rumbled outside, softer now. The storm was breaking. I know you hate me, Victor said. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know. I was wrong. About everything. You never betrayed me. The evidence was fake, planted by enemies, and I was too paranoid and too damaged to see it. Elena's hand remained limp in his. I searched for you, Victor admitted. After I learned the truth, I looked everywhere, spent 2 years trying to find you. But you were too good at disappearing. You learned from me, didn't you? How to erase yourself, how to become someone new. A nurse appeared at the curtain. Sir, visiting hours. I'm staying. Victor didn't look up. The nurse started to argue, then saw something in his face that changed her mind. Try to let her rest, she said quietly, and withdrew. Victor sat in the quiet recovery room, holding Elena's hand while machines kept her alive, and somewhere in the NICU, his son, their son, fought his own battle. The night stretched toward dawn. The storm finally died, leaving the city washed clean and exhausted. In other rooms, other patients recovered from other emergencies. The hospital slowly returned to normal operations as backup generators stabilized and repair crews restored power to affected areas. But in that small curtain space, time seemed to stop. Victor DeLuca, crime boss, killer, architect of violence, sat holding the hand of the woman he'd destroyed, and for the first time in 3 years, let himself feel the full weight of what he'd done. Around 4 a.m, Elena stirred. It was barely movement, just her fingers twitching slightly against his palm, but Victor felt it like an earthquake. Elena? He leaned forward. Can you hear me? Her eyes moved beneath closed lids. Her lips parted slightly, trying to form words. Don't try to talk, Victor said quickly. You're in the hospital. You're safe. The baby's safe. Everything's... Her eyes opened. For a moment, she just stared at him, confused and disoriented. Then recognition crashed in like a tidal wave. Her eyes widened. Her hand jerked in his grip, not pulling away but tensing, preparing for flight or fight. What? Her voice was a ruined whisper. What are you doing here? Victor's carefully prepared speeches evaporated. They called me. Your blood type. They needed a donor, and I was the only match they could find. Elena's free hand moved to her stomach, finding it flat beneath the blankets. Panic flooded her face. The baby's fine, Victor said quickly. He's in the NICU. He's small, but he's breathing on his own. He's going to be okay. He? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I have a son. We have a son. The words felt strange in Victor's mouth. 5 pounds, 2 ounces. They say he's strong. Elena closed her eyes, and the tears came harder. Victor didn't know what to do, how to comfort her, whether he even had the right to try. So he just held her hand and let her cry, watching her shoulders shake with sobs that had to hurt her surgical incision. Finally, she looked at him again. The tears had stopped, replaced by something harder, something that cut more than any blade. Why are you still here? She asked. You gave blood. You did your duty. You can leave now. Elena, don't. Her voice was still weak, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. Don't say my name like you have the right. Don't sit there holding my hand like we're anything to each other. Victor released her hand. You're right. I don't have the right. But I need you to know that you were wrong? Elena's laugh was broken glass. That the evidence was fake? That you're sorry? She turned her head away, staring at the curtain. One of your men already told me, 6 months ago. He found me, explained everything, offered me money to keep quiet about the baby. Victor's blood went cold. What? Marcus, I think his name was. Very polite, very professional, very clear about what would happen if I tried to contact you or make any claims. Elena's voice was flat, emotionless. I told him I wanted nothing from you. Not money, not protection, not acknowledgement, Nothing. I didn't send him. Victor's mind raced. Marcus had known. For 6 months, Marcus had known Elena was pregnant, and he'd paid her off without saying a word. I swear to you, I had no idea. It doesn't matter. Elena finally looked at him again, and the emptiness in her eyes was worse than hatred. You broke me 3 years ago, Victor. You took everything I was and destroyed it because you were too damaged to trust, too paranoid to listen. I rebuilt myself from nothing, changed my name, moved to a new city, started over completely. I know. You don't know anything. Her voice cracked. You don't know what it was like being thrown away like garbage, being called a liar and a traitor by the only person you'd ever loved. You don't know what it took to survive that. Victor felt each word like a physical blow. You're right. I don't know. But I want to. I want to understand. It doesn't matter what you want. Elena's hand moved to the call button. I want you to leave. Now. Elena, please. Get out! Her voice rose, and immediately the monitors started beeping frantically. Get out! Get out! Get out! A nurse rushed in. Sir, you need to leave. You're upsetting the patient. I'm not leaving her. Security, the nurse called. I need security and recovery. Victor stood, hands raised in surrender. Elena had curled into herself, one hand pressed to her incision, the other clutching the blanket. She wouldn't look at him, wouldn't acknowledge his presence except to shake with barely controlled rage or pain or both. I'll go, Victor said quietly. But Elena, I'm not leaving the hospital, not until I know you're both safe. She said nothing, just kept her face turned away while security guards appeared in the recovery room doorway. Victor left without resistance. The guards escorted him to a waiting area and made it clear he wasn't to return to recovery without permission. He didn't argue, didn't threaten, just found a chair in the corner and sat, pulling out his phone with hands that shook slightly. 17 missed calls from Marcus. Victor dialed. His second answered on the first ring. Boss, thank God, where are you? The storm knocked out. You paid off Elena. Victor's voice was ice. 6 months ago, you found her, you discovered she was pregnant with my child, and you paid her to keep quiet, didn't you? Silence. Then, Boss, I can explain. Can you? Victor asked softly. Can you explain why you kept this from me for half a year? Why you made decisions about my life, my child, without my knowledge or consent? I was protecting you, Marcus said. She disappeared for a reason. If she'd wanted you in her life, in the baby's life, she would have reached out. I thought, you thought wrong. Victor ended the call. He sat in the waiting room while the hospital came alive around him. Shift changes, breakfast carts, doctors making rounds. At 6 a.m., a NICU nurse found him and asked if he'd like to see his son. Victor followed her to the neonatal intensive care unit, a hushed, dimly lit space filled with small plastic cribs and the soft beeping of monitors. The nurse led him to an incubator in the corner where a tiny infant lay swaddled in blankets and wired to machines. He's doing very well, the nurse said softly, breathing room air, maintaining his temperature, taking to bottle feeding. You can touch him if you'd like. Victor stared at the baby through the plastic, his son. So small, so fragile. Dark hair like Elena's, visible even wet and matted, tiny hands curled into fists no bigger than walnuts. Does he have a name? The nurse asked. I don't know. Victor realized he knew nothing. Not if Elena had chosen a name, not what she'd planned, not anything about the life she'd built without him. She never told me she was pregnant. The nurse's expression softened with understanding. Would you like to hold him? Victor's first instinct was to refuse. He had no right, no experience, no idea how to hold something so small and breakable. But he nodded. The nurse opened the incubator and lifted the baby with practiced care, settling him into Victor's arms with quiet instructions about supporting the head, keeping him warm, being gentle. The infant weighed nothing, a handful of bones and warmth and potential. And then the baby opened his eyes. They were dark, unfocused, already trying to make sense of the world. The infant stared up at Victor with the kind of absolute trust that only the truly innocent possess. And something in Victor's chest cracked open. This was his son, his child, a life he'd helped create but had no part in protecting, nurturing, or knowing. A boy who would grow up without him unless Victor found a way to fix the unfixable. "Hey," Victor whispered, the word catching in his throat. "Hey, little one. I'm your father. I know that doesn't mean much right now, but..." The baby yawned, tiny and perfect, and nestled deeper into Victor's arms. "I'm gonna try," Victor continued, speaking promises he didn't know if he could keep. "I'm gonna try to be better than I was, better than what I did to your mother. I don't know if she'll let me anywhere near you, but I'm going to try." The baby's eyes drifted closed. His breathing evened out into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. Victor sat in the NICU for an hour, just holding his son, while around them other parents kept their own vigils over their own fragile miracles. Finally, the nurse indicated it was time to return the baby to the incubator. Victor surrendered his son with reluctance and returned to the waiting area. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. "Elena Hart has been moved to a private room, room 437. Victor took the elevator to the 4th floor. Room 437 was at the end of a quiet hallway, away from the main nursing station. Private, secure. The kind of room reserved for patients who needed protection or privacy. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What right did he have to disturb her? She'd made her position clear. She wanted nothing to do with him, wanted him gone, erased, removed from her life the way he'd removed her from his 3 years ago. But his son was in the NICU. Elena was recovering from surgery, and whether she liked it or not, they were bound now, by blood, by the child they'd created, by the weight of history that couldn't be undone. Victor knocked. "Come in." Elena's voice still weak but clearer than before. He opened the door. The private room was nicer than recovery. Larger, with a window showing the rain-washed city, a comfortable chair, a small bathroom. Elena sat propped up in bed, an untouched breakfast tray on the table beside her. She'd changed into a clean gown. Someone had brushed her hair. She looked at him with no expression whatsoever. "I thought I told you to leave." "You did." Victor remained in the doorway. "But we need to talk." "No, we don't." Elena picked up her phone. "I can call security again. They were very helpful earlier." "I saw him," Victor said quietly. "Our son. He's beautiful, Elena. He has your hair." Something flickered across her face, pain, longing, love, before the mask slammed back down. "You have no right to him." "I know." Victor stepped into the room. "I have no right to anything, but he exists and he's ours, and that means we need to figure out how this works." "How what works?" Elena's laugh was sharp. "You think we're going to co-parent, play happy family? Victor, you don't even know his name." The accusation hit like a slap. "Then tell me." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "Alessandro, after my father." "Alessandro." Victor tested the name silently. "It's a good name." "He'll never carry yours," Elena said. "His last name is Hart, not DeLuca. I made sure of that." "I don't care about names." Victor moved closer to the bed. "I care about keeping you both safe." "We don't need your protection." "Yes, you do." Victor's voice hardened. "Do you think you can just exist in this city with my child and nobody will notice? That my enemies won't find out, won't use him against me?" Elena's face went pale. "Then we'll leave. Go somewhere else." "Where?" Victor challenged. "Where can you go that my reach doesn't extend? Where can you hide that the people who want to hurt me won't eventually find you?" "That's not my problem. It is now." Victor leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The blood donation, the sleepless night, and the weight of everything he'd learned was catching up to him. "Like it or not, you're connected to me again. The hospital has my name on their records. People saw me here, saw me giving blood, saw me in the NICU. By tomorrow, every family in the city will know I have a son." Elena pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes wide with fear. "I'm not trying to scare you," Victor said more gently, "but you need to understand the reality. Alessandro isn't just your child anymore. He's my heir, my weakness, my vulnerability, and that makes him a target." "Because of you!" Elena's voice broke. "Because of your life, your choices, your violence." "Yes." Victor didn't flinch from the accusation. Because of me. Because of everything I am and everything I've built. But it doesn't change the fact that you both need protection. I don't want anything from you. This isn't about what you want. Victor's control finally cracked. This is about reality. This is about the fact that in 48 hours, every criminal organization on the East Coast will know I have a son, and they'll be calculating how to use that information against me. This is about keeping you and Alessandro alive. Silence fell between them, thick and tense. Outside, the sun was finally breaking through the storm clouds, casting weak light across the city. What do you want? Elena asked finally. Really? Victor met her eyes. A chance. That's all. A chance to prove I'm not the same man who destroyed you 3 years ago. A chance to protect my son. A chance to... He stopped. To what? To earn your forgiveness, Victor finished quietly. Even though I don't deserve it. Elena looked away, blinking back tears. I can't do this right now. I just had major surgery. My son is in the NICU. I haven't slept in... She checked the clock. 36 hours. I can't make decisions about the rest of our lives right now. Okay? Victor straightened. Then rest. Recover. Be with Alessandro. But Elena, let me help. Let me make sure you're both safe while you figure out what comes next. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision, Victor said. But I'll still protect you from a distance. You might not want my help, but you're going to have it whether you like it or not. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And from the way Elena's expression shifted, she understood the difference. I need to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need. Victor moved toward the door. I'll be here, for as long as it takes. He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. In the hallway, Victor leaned against the wall and allowed himself one moment of weakness. His hands were shaking, his head was spinning. The enormity of the past 12 hours was threatening to crush him. He had a son. The woman he'd loved and destroyed was alive. And he'd just committed himself to a course of action that would change everything. His empire, his enemies, his entire life. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Victor silenced it without looking. Then he walked back to the NICU, where Alessandro slept peacefully in his plastic crib, unaware of the storm he'd been born into, unaware of the father watching him through the glass with something that might have been hope. Outside, the city came alive with morning, car horns, sirens, the rhythms of life continuing as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis. But in Mercy Hospital, in the space between a recovery room and a NICU, the future hung suspended, waiting. The morning sun felt like an accusation. Victor stood at the NICU observation window, watching nurses tend to Alessandro through the glass. 48 hours had passed since the storm, since the desperate race through flooded streets, since he'd rolled up his sleeve and turned his blood into a lifeline. 48 hours, and the world had already started to shift beneath his feet. His phone had been ringing constantly. Marcus, Dimitri, the lawyers, business associates who'd heard rumors and wanted confirmation. Victor had ignored them all, maintaining his vigil between Elena's room and the NICU, like a ghost haunting the spaces he'd destroyed. Elena hadn't asked him to leave again, but she hadn't asked him to stay either. The NICU nurse, Janet, he'd learned her name, approached with a knowing smile. He's doing wonderfully, Mr. DeLuca. Gaining weight, temperature stable. Dr. Morrison says if he continues like this, we might be able to move him out of intensive care by tomorrow. That's good, Victor said, though the words felt inadequate. Everything felt inadequate lately. His mother was here earlier, Janet continued, adjusting Alessandro's blanket through the incubator ports. Around 5 this morning, she sat with him for 2 hours. Victor's chest tightened. How is she? Recovering well, physically. The incisions healing nicely. No signs of infection. Janet paused meaningfully. Emotionally is harder to gauge. Victor said nothing. What was there to say? That he'd broken Elena so thoroughly 3 years ago that even now, with their son fighting for stability in a plastic box, she could barely stand to be in the same room with him? She loves him fiercely, Janet said softly. I can see it in how she touches him, talks to him. That baby is everything to her. I know. Victor watched Alessandro's tiny chest rise and fall. That's what scares me. Janet gave him a curious look but didn't press. She'd been a NICU nurse for 23 years. She'd seen every variation of family drama play out in this unit. Whatever was happening between Victor and Elena, it wasn't her place to judge. You should talk to her, Janet said instead. Really talk, not through nurses or brief hallway encounters. Sit down and figure out what comes next. She doesn't want to talk to me. Maybe not, but she will, eventually, for his sake. Janet nodded toward Alessandro. That little boy is going to need both his parents, Mr. DeLuca. Whatever happened between you two, whatever damage was done, you're going to have to find a way past it. Victor knew she was right, but knowing and doing were separated by a chasm of guilt and regret 3 years wide. His phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID made him answer. Talk, he said curtly. Boss, we have a problem. Dimitri's voice was tight with tension. Castellano's crew knows. About the baby. About Elena. Ice flooded Victor's veins. Castellano, one of the rival families, small but vicious, always looking for leverage. How? Hospital records. They have someone on staff, probably in billing or admin. They accessed Elena's file, saw your name listed as emergency contact and father. Dimitri paused. It gets worse. They've been asking questions. Where she lives, where she works, whether she has family in the city. Victor's free hand clenched into a fist. Put surveillance on her apartment. 24-hour detail. No one gets close. Already done. But boss, her place isn't secure. Garden-level apartment, single entrance, minimal security. If they want to send a message, then we move her. Victor's mind raced through options. The penthouse has security, multiple exits, armed guards in the lobby. You think she's going to agree to live with you? Dimitri's skepticism was palpable. I don't care if she agrees. Her safety isn't negotiable. Victor glanced toward Elena's room. I'll handle it. You make sure the penthouse is ready. Extra security protocols, baby-proof the guest rooms, hire a nurse if we need one. Boss, you sure about this? Bringing them into your home? That's not just protection, that's... Do it, Victor ordered, ending the call. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, gathering himself. Elena would fight this. She'd see it as control, manipulation, another way for Victor to dominate her life. And maybe she wouldn't be entirely wrong, but he'd watched her flatline on an operating table. He'd held their son while machines kept him alive. He wasn't going to lose them to some territorial power play by a third-rate crime family. Victor knocked on Elena's door. Come in. She was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than she had yesterday. Color had returned to her face. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of matted against the pillow. She changed into her own clothes, soft pants and a sweater that hung loose around her post-pregnancy body. She looked at Victor without expression. Let me guess. You need to talk. We have a problem. Victor closed the door behind him. Castellano knows about Alessandro. Elena's face went white. How? Hospital records. They have someone inside. Victor moved to the window, checking the parking lot 4 stories below out of habit. They're gathering information, asking questions about you. Oh, God. Elena's hand trembled as she pressed it to her mouth. What do they want? Leverage. Information. A way to hurt me. Victor turned to face her. It doesn't matter what they want. What matters is keeping you and Alessandro safe. By doing what? Elena demanded. Hiring bodyguards? Putting me under surveillance? Victor, I have a life, a job, an apartment. Not anymore. Victor's voice was flat. You're moving to the penthouse. Today. The silence that followed was deafening. Excuse me? Elena's voice was dangerously quiet. It's not a request. Your apartment isn't secure. You're vulnerable there. The penthouse has... I don't care what the penthouse has. Elena struggled to stand, wincing at the pull on her incision. You don't get to make decisions about my life. Victor crossed the room in 3 strides, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. Sit down before you tear your stitches. Don't touch me. But she let him guide her back to the bed, breathing hard from the brief exertion. This isn't about control, Victor said, releasing her immediately.
This is about reality. Castellano's crew are animals. They don't follow codes or rules. If they decide to use you to get to me, then that's your fault. Elena's eyes blazed. Your enemies, your violence, your world. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you didn't. Victor's voice softened. But you have it anyway. Alessandro has it.
And I can either protect you from a distance and hope it's enough, or I can bring you somewhere I know is secure. You mean somewhere you can watch me, control me, keep me locked away like... Elena stopped, but the comparison hung between them. Like a possession, like property, like family, Victor finished quietly. The penthouse has separate quarters. You'd have your own space, your own privacy, but you'd also have armed security, monitored access, and the knowledge that no one can get to you or Alessandro without going through me first. Elena looked away, jaw tight. For how long? Until the threat is neutralized. Which could be never. She laughed bitterly. There will always be another threat, another enemy, another family looking for leverage. You're asking me to give up my entire life and live in a cage. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. Victor crouched beside the bed, bringing himself to her eye level. Elena, please, I know you hate me. I know you want nothing to do with me. But don't let your anger at me put Alessandro at risk. That hit home. Elena's expression crumbled slightly, maternal fear breaking through the armor of rage. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Victor held her gaze. But it's the situation we're in. And I need to know, can you put aside what happened between us long enough to let me protect our son? Their eyes met. For a moment, Victor saw past the anger to the woman underneath, exhausted, scared, overwhelmed by circumstances spiraling beyond her control. She was 27 years old, recovering from major surgery, with a newborn in the NICU and a past she'd tried desperately to escape catching up to her. She looked so tired. If I agree to this, Elena said slowly, there are conditions. Name them. Separate quarters, like you said. You don't come into my space without permission. No surprise visits, no monitoring, no controlling when I can leave or who I can see. Victor nodded. Agreed. I want my own security team. People I trust, not just your men. I'll have backgrounds checked, but yes. And the moment this threat is over, the moment Castellano backs off, we revisit this arrangement. I'm not committing to living with you indefinitely. Fair enough, Victor stood. Anything else? Elena hesitated. I want to see Alessandro whenever I want, even if it means you have to arrange transport to the hospital or wherever. I don't care about the inconvenience. Elena, Victor's voice was gentle. You're his mother. You'll never have to ask permission or negotiate access to your son. Never. Something in her expression shifted, surprise maybe, or the faint stirring of trust. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll try this. For Alessandro. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but Victor meant them completely. When? Elena asked. The discharge doctor said you can leave tomorrow if your incision looks good and your blood counts are stable. Alessandro might need another day or two, but we can arrange transport so you can be with him. Elena nodded slowly, processing. I need to get things from my apartment, clothes, documents. Give me a list. I'll send people. I want to go myself. No. Victor's tone left no room for argument. Castellano's crew might be watching your place. You're not going near it until we're sure it's clear. Elena opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She was too smart not to see the logic, even if she hated it. Fine. I'll make a list. I'll have everything brought to the penthouse before you arrive. Victor moved toward the door. Try to rest. You're still recovering. Victor? He turned back. Elena was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Why are you doing this? Really? You could just hire security for me. Keep us at a distance. Why bring us into your home? Because I can't breathe when I'm not sure you're safe, Victor thought. Because the idea of you and Alessandro vulnerable while I sit in my protected tower makes me physically ill. Because I destroyed you once, and I'll burn the world down before I let anyone else hurt you. But what he said was, because Alessandro is my son, and you're his mother. That makes you both my responsibility." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was all the truth Elena was ready to hear. Victor left her room and immediately called Dmitri back. "Status on the penthouse? Ready by tonight. I've got 3 guest suites prepared. Took your suggestion and set up the east wing for her. Most privacy, separate entrance if she wants it, nursery adjacent to the main bedroom." Dmitri paused. "Boss, you sure about this? Having them in your space, that's a big change." "I'm aware." Victor headed for the elevator. "What about Castellano?" "Our guys are putting pressure on their operations, disrupting supply lines, freezing their accounts, making life difficult. But Castellano's stubborn. He might not back down easily." "Then we escalate." Victor stepped into the elevator, alone. "I want a meeting. Tomorrow night. Neutral ground." "You're going to negotiate?" "I'm going to make him understand that Elena and Alessandro are off limits. Completely. Anyone who touches them, looks at them wrong, even thinks about using them for leverage." Victor's voice went cold. "I'll make an example that this city will remember for a generation." "Understood. I'll set it up." The elevator doors opened to the hospital lobby. Victor was halfway across the marble floor when a familiar voice stopped him. "Victor DeLuca. Didn't expect to see you playing the devoted father." Victor turned slowly. Marcus stood near the entrance, expensive suit immaculate despite the early hour. His second-in-command looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. "We need to talk," Marcus said. "We have nothing to discuss." Victor started walking again. Marcus fell into step beside him. "I know you're angry about Elena, about me handling it without telling you, but boss, I was trying to protect you." Victor stopped so abruptly that Marcus nearly walked into him. "Protect me? By paying off the mother of my child and keeping her existence secret for 6 months?" "She didn't want to be found." Marcus's voice rose, drawing looks from nearby visitors. He lowered it immediately. "Victor, she made it clear she wanted nothing to do with you. She'd built a new life. I thought you knew better than me what I needed." Victor's voice was deadly quiet. "You made a decision that wasn't yours to make." "I've been making those kinds of decisions for you for 20 years, Marcus said with unexpected heat. "Every time you were too blinded by emotion or rage or paranoia to see clearly, every time your judgment was compromised, I stepped in and did what needed to be done." This was different. "Why? Because it's about her?" Marcus shook his head. "You destroyed that woman 3 years ago, Victor. Tore her apart with your suspicions and your cruelty. I watched it happen. And when she finally escaped, when she built something away from your darkness, yes, I made a choice. I chose to let her have peace." Victor's hands clenched at his sides. "That wasn't your choice." "Then whose was it?" Marcus challenged. "Yours? You would have dragged her back into this life, into danger and violence, because you couldn't stand that she got away, because you couldn't stand that she didn't need you anymore." "I have a son." Each word was bitten off. "A son I knew nothing about because you decided I didn't deserve to know." "A son who was safer with you ignorant of his existence," Marcus countered. "Do you think Castellano would be circling if they didn't know about the baby? Do you think every enemy you've made would be calculating how to use him if you'd never claimed him publicly?" The truth of it hit like a punch. Marcus was right. Alessandro had been safer in obscurity, just another child in the city, protected by anonymity. Victor's involvement had painted a target on his son's back, but that didn't change the fundamental betrayal. "I trusted you," Victor said quietly. "For 2 decades, I trusted you with everything, my life, my business, my secrets. And you lied to me." Marcus's expression tightened. "I did what I thought was right." "That's not your call to make anymore." Victor met his eyes. "You're done. Effective immediately. Pack your office, transfer your responsibilities to Dmitri. I want you gone by tonight." The color drained from Marcus's face. "Victor, don't do this. Don't throw away 20 years over what? Over you deciding you knew better than me about my own life? Over you paying off Elena like she was a problem to solve instead of—" Victor stopped himself. "It's done, Marcus. We're done." He walked away before Marcus could respond, pushing through the hospital doors into morning sunlight that felt too bright, too cheerful for the conversation that had just occurred. His phone buzzed, a text from Janet in the NICU. Alessandro's moving to intermediate care. Elena's here if you want to see them. Victor changed direction, heading back into the hospital. The NICU was on the 3rd floor. He took the stairs, needing the physical exertion to burn off the adrenaline from confronting Marcus. The intermediate care nursery was less intense than the NICU. Fewer machines, more natural light, cribs instead of incubators. Alessandro had been moved to a corner spot, where Elena sat in a rocking chair beside him, her hand through the crib bars touching his tiny foot. She looked up when Victor entered, and something in her expression made him stop. "They're moving him," she said softly. "Janet says maybe 2 more days and we can take him home." Home. The word hung between them, undefined and weighted with implications. Victor approached slowly, giving Elena space to object. She didn't. He stood on the other side of Alessandro's crib, looking down at his son. The baby had grown in just 2 days. Not much, but visibly. His color was better. His breathing steady and strong. "He looks like you," Elena said unexpectedly. Victor glanced at her in surprise. "I thought you said he had your hair." "He does, but the shape of his face, his chin, that's all DeLuca." A faint smile ghosted across her lips. "My mother would say he has your stubborn mouth." The mention of Elena's mother, dead now, 5 years gone, created an ache in Victor's chest. Maria Castellano had liked him once, before everything fell apart, had welcomed him into her home, fed him, told him stories about Elena's childhood. Another thing he'd destroyed. "I'm sorry," Victor said quietly. "About your mother. I should have been there for the funeral." "You didn't know she died." Elena's voice was neutral. "I didn't tell anyone, just handled it myself." "You shouldn't have had to handle it alone." "I handled a lot of things alone." Elena pulled her hand back from Alessandro's crib. "You learn to when there's no one else." The accusation was gentle but unmistakable. Victor absorbed it without defense. "The penthouse is ready," he said instead, "whenever you're discharged. The East Wing has been prepared for you. 3 rooms, private bathroom, separate entrance if you want it. Dimitri set up a nursery adjacent to your bedroom." Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm still not sure about this." "I know, but it's the safest option we have right now." "Safe for Alessandro, you mean? Or safe for you?" Elena looked at him directly. "Be honest, Victor. This arrangement, is it about protecting us, or about making sure you don't lose access to your son?" The question was fair, brutal, but fair. "Both," Victor admitted. "I'm not going to lie to you, Elena. I want to know my son. I want to be part of his life. But that desire doesn't change the fact that Castellano's crew is asking questions, or that bringing you into my home is genuinely the most secure option available. Until your presence in his life makes him less safe than if you'd stayed away." Elena's voice cracked slightly. "Don't you see, Victor? Every day you're involved, every day you claim him publicly as your heir, you're putting him in danger. The safest thing for Alessandro would be for you to disappear." "You're right." The admission cost Victor something. "The safest thing would be for me to walk away. Let you raise him in anonymity. Never acknowledge him as mine." Hope flickered in Elena's eyes. "But I can't do that," Victor continued, "not because I'm selfish, though I probably am, but because the moment that hospital filed my name as his father, the moment Castellano accessed those records, that anonymity was already gone. Walking away now doesn't erase what's already known. It just means Alessandro has enemies and no protection." Elena closed her eyes. "I hate that you're right." "I hate it too." Victor reached through the crib bars, letting Alessandro's tiny hand wrap around his finger with surprising strength. "I hate that my son was born into a world where people will try to use him as a weapon. I hate that you're trapped in a situation you didn't choose. I hate all of it." "But you're not going to change," Elena said. It wasn't a question. "I'm going to try." Victor met her gaze over their sleeping son. "I'm not the same man I was 3 years ago, Elena. What I did to you, what I accused you of, how I treated you, it's haunted me every day since. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know I'm not asking you to trust that man. I'm asking you to trust that I've learned from destroying the best thing I ever had." Silence stretched between them. Alessandro stirred in his sleep, making small sounds that might have been dreams. "I don't trust you," Elena said finally. "I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I understand. But," she hesitated, "I believe that you love him. I can see it when you look at Alessandro. Whatever else you are, whatever you've done, you love our son." "More than my own life," Victor said without hesitation. "Then prove it." Elena's voice was steel-wrapped in exhaustion, not with words or promises, with actions. "Show me that you're willing to put Alessandro's safety above your pride, your empire, your need for control. Show me that you're capable of being the father he deserves." Victor nodded slowly. "I will, every day, for as long as it takes." Elena stood carefully, one hand pressed to her incision. "I need to go back to my room. The nurse said I should rest before discharge tomorrow." "I'll walk you back." "No." Elena's refusal was gentle but firm. "I need some space, Victor, to process all of this, please." He wanted to argue, wanted to stay close, to maintain the fragile connection they'd just established. But Elena was right. She needed space. She'd been overwhelmed with decisions and fear and the physical trauma of surgery. Pushing her now would only drive her further away. "Okay," Victor said. "But if you need anything, I'll call a nurse." Elena managed a tired smile. "I'm still not ready to call you." She left the intermediate care nursery slowly, one hand on the wall for balance. Victor watched her go, then turned back to Alessandro. "Your mother is the strongest person I've ever known," he told his sleeping son. "Stronger than me, smarter than me. And she has every reason to keep me away from you." He adjusted the baby's blanket with careful fingers. "But I'm going to earn my way back into her life anyway, not because I deserve it, but because you deserve a father who will fight for you, even if the biggest fight is against my own nature." Alessandro slept on, oblivious to the promises being made over his crib. Victor's phone buzzed. "Dimitri, meeting with Castellano is set. Tomorrow night, 11 p.m., the warehouse on Pier 7. Victor typed back, "I'll be there." Then, after a pause, "And Dimitri, you're acting second now. Marcus is out." The response came quickly. "Understood, boss. Won't let you down." Victor pocketed his phone and spent another hour watching Alessandro sleep before finally forcing himself to leave. The hospital had become a strange kind of sanctuary over the past 48 hours, a place where the rules of his normal life didn't apply, where violence and power meant nothing compared to the fragile lives being fought for in plastic cribs and recovery rooms. But he couldn't hide in the hospital forever. His empire needed attention, Castellano needed handling, and the penthouse needed to be transformed from a bachelor's fortress into something resembling a home. The drive back to his building felt surreal. The storm had passed completely, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming in afternoon sunlight. Street crews worked to clear debris. Store owners swept water from their shops. Life continued, indifferent to the fact that Victor's entire world had shifted on its axis. The penthouse felt too large and too quiet. Victor walked through rooms he barely used, formal dining area, library, screening room, seeing them through Elena's eyes, cold, impersonal, more fortress than home. Dimitri had already started the transformation. The east wing had been opened up, aired out, filled with furniture that looked comfortable instead of just expensive. The nursery made Victor's chest ache. Soft colors, careful safety measures, a rocking chair positioned to catch the morning light. "Boss?" Dimitri appeared in the nursery doorway. Delivery came. Baby supplies, clothes in various sizes since we weren't sure what he'd need. Nurse agency sent over 3 candidates for you to interview. "No nurse," Victor said. "Elena will want to care for Alessandro herself." "You sure? New mothers usually appreciate the help." "She's not a usual mother. She's a woman who's been forced into an impossible situation. The last thing she needs is me hiring staff to take care of her child." Dimitri nodded slowly. "Okay, what about security protocols?" "Tight, but invisible. I don't want her to feel like she's in a prison." Victor moved to the window, looking out over the city. Post guards on the ground floor and at the private elevator, but keep them low profile. Install cameras in common areas only, nothing in her quarters. And make sure everyone on staff understands that Elena is not to be questioned, followed, or reported on. She has complete freedom of movement within the building. And outside the building? Accompanied by security until the Castellano situation is resolved. But that's non-negotiable for safety reasons, not control. Dmitri made notes on his tablet. The meeting tomorrow night. You want backup? Obviously, but keep it contained. 4 men, no more. This is a conversation, not a war. Victor turned from the window. What's Castellano's current status? Feeling the pressure. We've disrupted 3 shipments, frozen 2 offshore accounts, and convinced 4 of his distributors to find new suppliers. He's bleeding money and credibility. Dmitri smiled grimly. He'll come to the table ready to negotiate. Good, because the only acceptable negotiation is complete capitulation. Elena and Alessandro are untouchable. Any family that violates that... Victor's voice went cold. I'll erase them from the map. Understood, boss. After Dmitri left, Victor stood alone in the nursery, imagining it filled with life. Alessandro in the crib, Elena in the rocking chair, maybe reading or singing, the sound of a baby crying, laughing, growing. It felt impossible, like something from someone else's life. But it was his life now. For better or worse, he'd claimed it by giving blood, by showing up, by refusing to walk away, even when walking away would have been easier for everyone. His phone rang. Unknown number, Victor answered. Yes? Mr. DeLuca? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. This is Sarah Chen. I'm calling about Elena Hart's discharge tomorrow. Is there a problem? No, everything looks good for discharge, but I wanted to discuss post-operative care. She'll need monitoring for the next 2 weeks. Incision checks, pain management, signs of infection. Typically, we recommend home health visits. She'll be staying with me, Victor interrupted. Whatever care she needs, I'll arrange it. Dr. Chen paused. Mr. DeLuca, I don't know the specifics of your relationship with Miss Hart, but I need to be clear about something. She's been through significant trauma, physical and emotional. She needs rest, support, and minimal stress. Whatever situation you're bringing her into, it needs to prioritize her recovery. It will. Victor's voice was firm. She'll have her own space, complete privacy, and access to whatever medical care she needs. I'm not bringing her into my home to control her, doctor. I'm bringing her here to keep her safe. Another pause. Safe from what? Victor considered how much to reveal. From people who would use her to hurt me. That's all you need to know. I see. Dr. Chen's tone cooled slightly. Well, Ms. Hart is an adult capable of making her own choices. But if I have any concerns about her recovery environment, I won't hesitate to intervene. I wouldn't expect anything less. Victor ended the call. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparations. Dmitri coordinated security rotations. Staff brought in supplies. Victor personally checked every lock, every camera, every possible point of entry to the East Wing. If Elena was going to be here, if Alessandro was going to be here, then this building needed to be impenetrable. By evening, everything was ready. The East Wing looked less like a guest area and more like a home. Warm, comfortable, safe. The nursery was stocked with everything a newborn might need. Elena's rooms had been furnished with care, balancing privacy with comfort. Victor stood in the main living area of the East Wing, surveying his work. It still wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough to make up for what he'd done, what he'd destroyed. But it was a start. His phone buzzed, a text from Elena. They're discharging me tomorrow at 10 a.m., Alessandro 2 days later. Victor typed back, I'll have the car ready. Do you need anything before then? The response took several minutes. No, just make sure the nursery is really safe. Please. I promise, Victor sent back. He'll be protected. Both of you will. No response came. Victor didn't expect one. That night, alone in his 2 large penthouse, Victor stood at the windows and looked out over the city he controlled. Somewhere out there, Castellano was plotting. Other enemies were watching. The world continued its violent rotation, indifferent to the small life in the hospital nursery, or the woman recovering from surgery, or the man who'd given his blood to save them both. But tomorrow,
Elena would come here. In 2 days, Alessandro would follow. And Victor would have a chance, perhaps his only chance, to prove that he'd learned from his mistakes, that he was capable of being more than the cruel, paranoid man who'd destroyed the woman he loved. He had to succeed. Failure wasn't an option, because this time, it wasn't just Elena's heart at stake. It was their son's future. And Victor would tear apart anyone, including himself, who threatened that. The car arrived at exactly 10 in the morning as promised. Victor watched from the penthouse security feed as the black SUV pulled up to Mercy Hospital's main entrance. Dimitri at the wheel and 2 additional guards in tactical positions. Overkill for a simple hospital pickup, maybe. But nothing about this situation was simple anymore. His phone buzzed with Dimitri's text. In position, waiting for her. Victor switched camera angles, pulling up the feed he absolutely shouldn't have had access to, the hospital's 4th-floor hallway. He told himself it was about security, about making sure Elena made it safely from her room to the car. But the truth sat heavier in his chest. He just needed to see her, needed to confirm she was really coming, really trusting him enough to walk into his world. The elevator doors opened. Elena emerged in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse, despite her obvious protests. She wore jeans and a loose sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Even through the grainy security feed, Victor could see the careful way she moved, protecting her incision and the determined set of her jaw that meant she was forcing herself through pain. She'd always been stubborn. It was one of the first things he'd loved about her. Victor's finger hovered over his phone, ready to call Dimitri with last-minute instructions when movement on another camera caught his attention. A dark sedan parked across from the hospital entrance. 2 men inside, watching. His blood went cold. Victor zoomed in on the license plate, already pulling up his recognition software. The results came back in seconds, registered to a shell company Castellano used for surveillance operations. They were watching her. Right now, in broad daylight, they were watching Elena leave the hospital. Victor's hands clenched on his phone. He forced himself to breathe, to think tactically instead of reactively. Dimitri and his team were trained for this. The SUV was armored. Elena would be fine, but the message was clear. Castellano wanted Victor to know they could reach her anytime they wanted. Victor made a call. "Boss?" Dimitri answered immediately. "Dark sedan, 11 o'clock from your position, 2 men inside, Castellano's surveillance." Victor kept his voice level. "Don't engage, just get her home safe. I'll handle them." "Copy that." Dimitri's tone sharpened with understanding. "Any changes to route?" "Take the long way. Lose them if you can, but don't make it obvious. I want them to think we're unaware." "Understood." Victor watched Elena being helped into the SUV, the nurse providing last-minute discharge instructions through the open door. Elena nodded, smiled tiredly, and then the door closed and she was sealed inside Victor's protection, whether she fully understood it or not. The SUV pulled away from the curb. The dark sedan followed at a careful distance. Victor made another call. "I need a team on a dark blue sedan, license plate." He rattled off the numbers. "Follow them back to wherever they're staging. I want locations, personnel count, and surveillance setups. Don't spook them. Just gather intelligence." "On it, boss." Victor switched back to the traffic cameras, tracking the SUV's progress through the city. Dimitri was good. He varied speed, changed lanes unpredictably, took turns that seemed random, but slowly widened the gap between them and their tail. By the time they reached Victor's building, the sedan had dropped back several blocks, maintaining visual but clearly outmatched. The SUV disappeared into the building's underground garage. Victor finally allowed himself to exhale. His private elevator chimed. Victor straightened his jacket, ran a hand through his hair, and realized he was nervous. Actually nervous. He'd faced down armed rivals, negotiated million-dollar deals, and built an empire on the principle that fear was weakness. But the idea of Elena walking into his home, judging his preparations, deciding whether this arrangement was tolerable, that terrified him more than any gun ever had. The elevator doors opened. Elena stepped out slowly, one hand braced against the wall. She looked exhausted and determined in equal measure, her eyes sweeping across the penthouse's main living area with an expression Victor couldn't quite read. "Welcome," he said, the word feeling inadequate and formal. Elena's gaze found him. "Where's my room?"
No pleasantries, no acknowledgement of the space or the effort or anything else. Just straight to business. Victor told himself not to feel disappointed. This way, he gestured toward the east wing. Everything's been set up according to your requirements. Private entrance, separate quarters, nursery adjacent to your bedroom. Elena followed him through the penthouse, her footsteps careful and measured. Victor kept his pace slow, hyper-aware of her post-surgical limitations. They passed through the main living area, down a wide hallway lined with abstract art Elena probably hated, and finally through a set of double doors that marked the entrance to the east wing. The transformation was immediate. Where the main penthouse was all steel and glass and masculine edges, the east wing had been softened, warm colors, comfortable furniture, windows with actual curtains instead of just architectural glass. It looked like a home instead of a showcase. Elena stopped in the doorway, surprise flickering across her face. The bedroom's through there, Victor indicated. Bathroom's en suite, fully stocked. The nursery is the door on the right. There's also a small sitting area and kitchenette if you want privacy for meals. Elena walked into the space slowly, her hand trailing along the back of a sofa. She looked into the bedroom, then the nursery. When she turned back to Victor, some of the hardness in her expression had softened slightly. "This is nice," she admitted. "I expected something more. Clinical, controlling," Victor supplied. "I know what you expected from me, Elena. I'm trying to be better than that." She studied him for a long moment. "We'll see." "Fair enough." "There's a panic button in every room," Victor continued, keeping his tone businesslike. "Press it, and security responds immediately. The private entrance code is set to whatever you want. You can program it from the panel by the door. Staff won't enter your space without permission, and I've made it clear that you're not to be questioned or monitored." "But you'll know when I come and go," Elena said. It wasn't a question. The building has security cameras in common areas for everyone's safety, but no, I won't be tracking your movements or demanding schedules. Victor met her eyes. "You're not a prisoner, Elena. You're a guest who I'm trying to keep safe. A guest who can't leave without armed escorts. Until Castellano backs down." "Yes," Victor's voice hardened. "They were watching the hospital this morning. A surveillance team followed you here." Elena's face went pale. "What?" "Dmitri lost them, and I've got people tracking them back to their staging area. But Elena, this is real. They're not just asking questions anymore. They're actively monitoring you." Elena sank onto the sofa, one hand pressed to her abdomen. "Oh God." Victor wanted to go to her, to offer comfort, but he forced himself to maintain distance. "You're safe here. This building has security that makes Fort Knox look casual. No one gets in without clearance, and even if they somehow did, they'd have to go through 12 floors of armed guards to reach you." "But Alessandro," Elena's voice cracked. "He's still at the hospital. He's vulnerable. He has round-the-clock security. 2 guards outside the NICU at all times, plus hospital security has been briefed. No one gets near him without proper ID and authorization." Victor pulled out his phone, showing her the security feeds. "Look, that's the NICU entrance. See the 2 men in suits? That's my team." Elena stared at the screen, watching the guards maintain their position with professional vigilance. "This is insane. This whole situation is insane." "I know. He's 4 days old, Victor. 4 days old, and he already has bodyguards and enemies and—" She stopped, pressing both hands to her face. "This isn't the life I wanted for him." "It's not the life I wanted for him either." Victor sat in the chair across from her, careful to maintain distance. "But it's the reality we're dealing with. And I promise you, Elena, I will do whatever it takes to keep both of you safe. Whatever it takes." Elena lowered her hands, her eyes red but dry. "The meeting with Castellano. When is it?" Victor hesitated. "Tonight." "I want to be there." "Absolutely not. It's about me and Alessandro," Elena argued. "I have a right. You have a right to safety, which means staying far away from that meeting." Victor's tone left no room for negotiation. "Castellano's crew are violent and unpredictable. I'm not bringing you anywhere near them." "Then what? I just sit here while you negotiate my life?" Elena's voice rose, then she winced, hand going to her incision. "Sorry, I shouldn't. The doctor said not to strain. You need to rest." Victor stood. I'll have food sent over. What would you like? I'm not hungry. Elena, Victor softened his voice. You're recovering from major surgery. You need to eat to keep your strength up. For yourself and for when Alessandro comes home. The mention of their son seemed to deflate her resistance. Something light, soup maybe, and tea. Done. Victor headed for the door, then paused. The meeting tonight. I'll tell you everything afterward. No secrets. You have my word. Elena looked at him with those dark eyes that had haunted him for 3 years. Your word didn't mean much last time. The hit landed clean and sharp. Victor absorbed it without defense. You're right, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove it means something now. He left before she could respond, closing the east wing doors behind him and finally allowing himself to breathe. That had gone better than he'd feared, but worse than he'd hoped. Elena was here, safe, but the distance between them felt like a physical thing, miles of hurt and betrayal that couldn't be crossed with good intentions alone. Dmitri was waiting in the main living area, tablet in hand. The tale's been tracked back to a warehouse in the industrial district. 4 men total, rotating surveillance shifts. Looks like a standard observation setup. Keep monitoring them. I want to know if they make any moves toward the hospital or this building. Victor checked his watch. Status on tonight's meeting? All set. Castellano confirmed for 11 p.m. Pier 7 warehouse, neutral ground. He's bringing 4 men. We're bringing 4. No weapons search, but we'll have backup staged nearby. Good. Victor moved to the windows, looking out over the city that would never stop demanding blood and strategy and careful navigation of power. Make sure the backup team understands. If this goes sideways, if Castellano tries anything, the priority is getting back here to protect Elena and Alessandro, not me. Dimitri's eyebrows rose. Boss, that's an order. Victor's voice was steel. My life isn't worth as much as theirs. Not anymore. After a long moment, Dmitri nodded. Understood. The afternoon crawled past. Victor tried to work, reviewing reports and handling business that had been neglected during the hospital crisis, but his attention kept drifting. Was Elena comfortable? Was she resting? Did she need anything? He'd set up this arrangement specifically to give her privacy and autonomy, but the not knowing gnawed at him. Around 4, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Victor's hand went to the gun he kept in his desk drawer, every instinct screaming trap, before he recognized the area code. Hospital number. The text read, Mr. DeLuca, this is Janet from NICU. Alessandro had a great day, took full bottles, stable vitals. We're moving him to discharge prep tomorrow. Thought you'd want to know. Victor stared at the message, something warm and unfamiliar spreading through his chest. His son, getting stronger, coming home. He texted back. Thank you for the update. Please keep me informed. Janet's response was immediate. Will do. Also, his mother called 3 times today to check on him. She's anxious. Might help if you could get her to rest instead of worrying. Victor smiled slightly. Even the NICU nurses could see that Elena was running herself ragged. He forwarded the message to the East Wing's intercom system, then stopped himself. That felt too invasive, too much like monitoring. Instead, he walked to the East Wing doors and knocked. No answer. Victor knocked again, louder. Elena, it's Victor. I have news about Alessandro. The door opened a crack. Elena peered out, her hair mussed from sleep, confusion on her face. What's wrong? Is he okay? He's fine. Better than fine. Victor held up his phone, showing her Janet's message. I just thought you'd want to know. Elena read the text, and her entire body seemed to relax. Oh, thank God, I've been calling every hour, but... Janet mentioned. Victor smiled slightly. She suggested I try to get you to rest instead of worrying. I can't help it. He's so small and I'm not there, and... Elena stopped, seeming to realize she was explaining herself to Victor of all people. Never mind. Thank you for telling me. She started to close the door. Victor put his hand up, stopping it. Have you eaten? The soup was fine. That's not what I asked, Elena sighed. I had half the bowl. I wasn't very hungry. You need to keep your strength up, Victor said, hearing the echo of his earlier words. What if I had dinner sent up, something more substantial than soup? Victor, I'm fine. Humor me. He softened his tone.
Please. I know I can't undo the past, but I can at least make sure you're taken care of now. Elena studied him for a long moment, and Victor could see her weighing options, calculating whether accepting basic care constituted some kind of surrender. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but nothing heavy. My stomach's still sensitive from the surgery. Grilled chicken and vegetables? That works? Victor pulled out his phone, texting the building's kitchen service. It'll be ready in 30 minutes. I'll have it brought to your door. You're not joining me? The question sounded almost disappointed, though Elena's expression remained neutral. I didn't think you'd want my company, Victor admitted. But if you're offering, I'm not offering. Elena's response was quick. I'm just surprised. You seem to be keeping your distance. Because that's what you asked for. Victor met her eyes. Separate quarters, privacy, no surprise visits. I'm trying to respect your boundaries, Elena. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or the faint stirring of respect. Oh. Well. Good. Keep doing that. She closed the door, leaving Victor standing in the hallway with the strangest sense of progress. It wasn't much, but it was something. Dinner was delivered to the East Wing precisely 30 minutes later. Victor watched the security feed as Elena accepted the tray from the staff member, offered a tired smile of thanks, and retreated back into her space. She ate alone, and Victor told himself he had no right to wish otherwise. At 9 p.m., Victor began preparing for the meeting. Dark suit, no tie, formal enough to show respect, casual enough to suggest he wasn't worried. Gun in a shoulder holster, knife in his boot. Standard precautions for any meeting with potential hostiles. Dmitri arrived at 10 with the security team. 4 men, all experienced, all loyal. They'd worked for Victor for years, had proven themselves in situations far more dangerous than a warehouse negotiation. Ready, boss? Dmitri asked. Victor glanced toward the East Wing. The lights were still on. Elena was awake, probably worrying about Alessandro, about the meeting, about everything. Give me a minute, Victor said. He walked to the East Wing doors and knocked. This time, Elena answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. You're leaving, she said. Not a question. Yes, I'll be back in a few hours. Victor paused. I wanted you to know the security here is tripled tonight. Extra guards, extra protocols, you're completely safe. I'm not worried about me. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. Be careful. Please. The concern in her voice caught Victor off guard. I will. I mean it, Victor. Elena's eyes held his. Alessandro needs his father. Don't do anything stupid. Something in Victor's chest tightened. I won't. I promise. Elena nodded, then stepped back and closed the door. But the fact that she'd asked him to be careful, that she'd acknowledged Alessandro's need for his father, that meant more than Victor could have articulated. The warehouse on Pier 7 was exactly the kind of place where bad deals went to die. Abandoned shipping containers, broken pavement, water lapping against rotted pilings with sounds like whispers. Victor's team arrived 15 minutes early, securing positions and checking sight lines. At exactly 11 p.m., headlights cut through the darkness. A black SUV, identical to the one Dmitri drove, rolled to a stop 30 feet from Victor's position. The doors opened and Castellano emerged with his entourage. Anthony Castellano was 53, stocky, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you saw his eyes. He'd been trying to expand his territory for years, always probing for weakness, always looking for leverage. Tonight, he thought he'd found it. Victor De Luca, Castellano's voice carried across the open space. Didn't think you'd actually show. You asked for a meeting. I'm here. Victor remained still, hands visible, posture relaxed. Let's talk. Castellano walked closer, his men flanking him. Dmitri and Victor's team mirrored the formation, maintaining careful distance. The two groups faced each other like opposing armies before a parley. Word is you've got yourself a family now, Castellano said conversationally. Wife and kid. That's sweet. Very domestic. She's not my wife, Victor corrected. Victor's. And my personal life isn't your concern. It is when it creates opportunities. Castellano smiled, showing teeth. See?
For years, you've been untouchable. No family, no attachments, no weaknesses. But now you've got soft spots, things that can be pressed. Victor's expression didn't change. Is there a point to this, Anthony? The point is negotiation. Castellano spread his hands. You've been disrupting my operations, freezing accounts, blocking shipments, making things difficult. I want that to stop. Then stop watching my family. Can't do that. See, your family is my leverage now. Insurance, if you will. Castellano's smile widened. You leave my operations alone. I leave them alone. You keep interfering, and maybe one day your girl takes a walk in the park with the baby, and Victor moved before Castellano finished the sentence. 3 steps closed the distance between them. His hand locked around Castellano's throat, slamming the older man back against his SUV's hood with enough force to dent the metal. Guns came out on both sides. Victor's team and Castellano's crew drew simultaneously, creating a Mexican standoff with Victor and Castellano at ground zero. Let me be very clear, Victor said softly, his hand tightening on Castellano's windpipe. Elena Hart and my son are not leverage. They're not negotiating chips. They're not opportunities or insurance or anything else you want to call them. They're off limits, completely, permanently. Castellano clawed at Victor's wrist, his face turning red. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. You thought having a child made me weaker. It doesn't. Victor leaned closer. It makes me more dangerous than I've ever been, because now I have something worth killing for, worth dying for, worth burning this entire city down for. He released Castellano, who collapsed against the SUV, gasping. Here's what's going to happen, Victor continued, his voice carrying to both teams. You're going to pull all surveillance on Elena. You're going to forget you ever heard my son's name. You're going to stay so far away from them that if I even hear a rumor of your people in the same zip code, I will erase your organization from existence. Castellano coughed, one hand massaging his throat. You can't. I have protection, alliances. I don't care. Victor's voice was ice. Test me on this, Anthony. Please. Give me an excuse to show this city what happens to anyone who threatens my family. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the water seemed to stop lapping against the pilings. Finally, Castellano straightened, his pride clearly stinging. And my operations? You going to keep disrupting them? That depends entirely on you. Victor stepped back, giving Castellano space. Stay away from Elena and Alessandro, and we can coexist. I have no interest in your territory or your business, but threaten what's mine again, even indirectly. He let the sentence hang. Castellano's jaw worked, fury and calculation warring on his face. He was being backed into a corner, forced to choose between pride and survival. Victor had seen this moment 100 times with 100 different rivals. The smart ones chose survival. After what felt like an eternity, Castellano nodded tersely. Fine. Your family's off limits. You have my word. Your word isn't worth much, Victor said bluntly. So here's additional motivation. I've compiled files on every aspect of your operation, suppliers, distributors, money routes, the works. If anything happens to Elena or Alessandro, if they so much as get a threatening phone call, those files go to every federal agency and rival family in the region. Your empire won't just fall. It'll be carved up and distributed before your body's cold. Castellano's face went white. You're bluffing. Victor pulled a tablet from Dimitri's hands and brought up a document. He showed it to Castellano, just long enough for the man to see his own operation laid bare in meticulous detail. Do I look like I'm bluffing? Victor asked quietly. Castellano stared at the tablet, at the evidence of just how thoroughly Victor had infiltrated his organization. When he looked up, the fight had drained from his eyes. We're done here, Castellano said to his men. He turned back to Victor. Your family's safe from me. But DeLuca, this doesn't mean we're friends. I don't need friends, Victor replied. I need people who understand consequences. Castellano and his team retreated to their SUV. The engine roared to life and they disappeared into the night, leaving Victor's team alone on the pier. Dimitri was the first to lower his weapon. Boss, that was necessary. Victor's hands were shaking slightly from adrenaline, but his voice remained steady. Make sure those files are distributed to our secure locations. If anything happens to me, they go public automatically. Already done, boss. Dmitri holstered his gun. You think he'll honor the agreement? He'll honor it as long as he thinks the consequences outweigh the benefits. Victor headed back to his SUV. And as long as he believes I'm crazy enough to burn everything down to protect them. Are you? Dmitri asked. That crazy? Victor paused at the vehicle door, looking back at the warehouse, at the city beyond, at everything he'd built with blood and calculation and ruthless ambition. Yes, he said simply. I absolutely am. The drive back to the penthouse was quiet. Victor's team maintained professional silence, understanding that their boss needed space to process. By the time they arrived, it was past 1 a.m. The building's lobby was quiet, just night security at their posts. Victor took the private elevator up, exhaustion finally catching up to him. The meeting had gone as well as could be expected. Castellano had backed down, agreed to terms, understood the stakes. But Victor knew better than to assume the threat was completely neutralized. Men like Castellano didn't forget humiliation easily. The penthouse was dark when he entered. Victor moved quietly through the main living area, not wanting to disturb Elena if she'd managed to sleep. But as he passed the east wing, he noticed light under the door. She was awake. Victor hesitated, then knocked softly. The door opened immediately. Elena stood there in pajamas, her hair down, concern written across her face. You're back. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Victor was surprised by her obvious worry. Everything went according to plan. Which means what exactly? Elena wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Did you threaten him? Hurt him? Make some kind of deal? All of the above. Victor saw no point in lying. Castellanos agreed to leave you and Alessandro alone, permanently. Relief flooded Elena's face. Really? It's over? For now. I can't promise another threat won't emerge, but this particular one is handled. Victor paused. Can I come in? I'll tell you everything, but I'd rather not do it in the hallway. Elena considered, then stepped aside. Victor entered the east wing, struck again by how different it felt from the rest of the penthouse. Warmer, more lived in, even after just one day. They sat in the small living area, Elena curled into the corner of the sofa, Victor in the armchair across from her. He told her everything, the surveillance tale, the warehouse meeting, his threat to Castellano, the files he'd compiled as insurance. Elena listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from fear to surprise to something that might have been reluctant admiration. You threatened to destroy his entire organization, she said when he finished. For us. Yes. That's insane, Victor. You made an enemy for life. I made an enemy understand boundaries. Victor met her eyes. And yes, it's insane. But I meant what I said at that warehouse. I'll burn this city down before I let anyone hurt you or Alessandro. Elena pulled the blanket tighter. I don't know if that's romantic or terrifying. Probably both. Victor allowed himself a small smile. But it's the truth. You wanted me to prove I'd put Alessandro's safety above everything else. This is me proving it. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the night settling around them. Thank you, Elena said finally, for telling me everything, for not trying to protect me from the details. You have a right to know what's happening. It's your life too. Victor stood, suddenly aware of how inappropriate this was. Him in her private space at 1 a.m, both of them exhausted, the air between them charged with something he didn't want to name. I should let you rest, he said. Victor? Elena's voice stopped him at the door. Tomorrow, when Alessandro comes home, I'd like you to be there, to bring him home with me. Victor turned back, surprised. You would? He's your son too. Elena's expression was complex, layered with emotions Victor couldn't fully read. And despite everything, despite all the history and hurt, you did save his life. Both our lives. You deserve to be there when he comes home. It was the closest thing to forgiveness Elena had offered. Victor felt something crack open in his chest. I'll be there, he promised. Whatever time you want. Morning, early. I want him home as soon as possible. Then we'll go first thing. Victor paused. Elena, don't, she interrupted gently. Don't say anything profound or make promises about the future. Let's just take this one day at a time, okay? Victor nodded. One day at a time. He left the East Wing and returned to his own bedroom, but sleep was impossible. Tomorrow, Alessandro would come home. Tomorrow, his son would be under this roof, filling these sterile spaces with life. Tomorrow, everything would change again. And for the first time in 3 years, Victor felt something dangerously close to hope. Victor was awake before dawn, watching the city emerge from darkness through his bedroom windows. He'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, his mind too restless with anticipation and residual adrenaline from the Castellano meeting. Today, Alessandro came home. Today, his son would cross the threshold into this carefully constructed fortress and transform it into something Victor had never allowed it to be, a family home. The thought terrified him more than any business negotiation ever had. At 6 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Are you awake?" Victor responded immediately. "Yes. Do you need something?" "Can't sleep. Too anxious about bringing him home. Is that normal?" Victor smiled slightly, typing back, "I think it's very normal. I'm anxious too." There was a pause, then, "You are? I thought you'd be used to high-pressure situations." "Not like this," Victor admitted. "This matters more than anything I've ever done." Another pause, longer this time. Then Elena's response, "Meet me in the kitchen? I need coffee, and I don't want to drink alone." Victor stared at the message, surprised by the invitation. Elena had been so careful about maintaining distance, about keeping their interactions formal and necessary. This felt different, personal. "I'll be right there," he sent back. He found her in the penthouse's main kitchen, wearing the same pajamas from last night with a cardigan thrown over them. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and without makeup she looked younger, more vulnerable. She was attempting to operate the complicated espresso machine with obvious frustration. "Here," Victor said, moving to help. "Let me." Elena stepped aside gratefully. "I forgot how absurdly complex rich people make their coffee." "It's not that complex once you know the settings." Victor pulled 2 cups from the cabinet. "How do you take it?" "Strong, with a little cream." Elena leaned against the counter, watching him work. "I used to drink it black, but pregnancy changed my taste for everything. Now even water tastes weird sometimes." Victor prepared 2 cappuccinos with the kind of precision he applied to everything, the familiar ritual calming his nerves. He handed Elena her cup and watched her take the first sip. "Oh," she said, surprise evident. "This is actually perfect. How did you—" "I remember." Victor didn't elaborate. He remembered everything about Elena. How she took her coffee, her favorite foods, the way she hummed when she was concentrating, the sound of her laugh before he destroyed her ability to find joy. He'd spent 3 years trying to forget and failed completely. Elena cupped her hands around the warm mug, not quite meeting his eyes. "We should probably talk about logistics, for when Alessandro comes home." "Of course." Victor gestured toward the breakfast bar. They sat on adjacent stools, a careful distance maintained between them. "The nursery is beautiful," Elena began, "but I'll want to keep him in my room for the first few weeks, the bassinet by my bed. Is that okay?" "Elena, you don't need to ask permission for how you care for our son." Victor's voice was gentle. "Whatever you think is best for Alessandro, that's what we'll do. But it's your home. It's your home too now, at least temporarily." Victor set down his coffee. "I meant what I said about privacy and autonomy. You're not a guest following house rules. You're Alessandro's mother, and this space is yours to use however you need." Elena studied him over the rim of her cup. "You're being very reasonable. It's disconcerting. Would you prefer I be difficult?" "No, I just—" Elena sighed. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to start making demands or trying to control things. The Victor I knew 3 years ago would have already outlined a detailed schedule and hired a nanny without consulting me. The Victor from 3 years ago was an idiot." Victor's voice was flat. He thought control and protection were the same thing. He thought trusting someone made him weak. He was wrong about almost everything that mattered. Elena's expression softened slightly. "What changed?" "Losing you changed me." Victor met her eyes. Spending 3 years knowing I'd destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too damaged to recognize what I had. That changes a person, Elena. It should, anyway. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the espresso machine and the distant noise of the city waking up beyond the windows. I'm scared, Elena admitted quietly, of bringing him home, of being responsible for this tiny human who depends on me completely. What if I do something wrong? What if I can't? You'll be amazing. Victor's certainty was absolute. You're strong, intelligent, and you love him more than anything. That's what matters. But I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I, Victor said. We'll figure it out together. If you want my help, that is. Elena looked at him then, really looked, and Victor saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to maintain distance, to protect herself from getting hurt again. But she was also exhausted and scared and facing the overwhelming reality of new motherhood largely alone. I might need help sometimes, she said carefully, with practical things. Not because I can't do it myself, but because it would be easier with two people. Then I'm here, whenever you need me. Victor paused. Elena, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can I be honest with you about something? She tensed slightly. I guess. I want to be a real father to Alessandro, not just a name on a birth certificate or a source of financial support. I want to know him, to be part of his life in meaningful ways. But I also know that my world, my choices, my past, put him at risk. Victor's voice roughened with emotion. So if you ever decide that he'd be safer without me, if you want to take him somewhere far away where my enemies can't find you, I'll let you go. I won't fight you. Because his safety matters more than my desires. Elena's eyes widened. You'd really do that? Just let us leave? If it was what was best for Alessandro, yes. Victor forced the words out. It would destroy me, but I'd do it, because being a father isn't about what I want. It's about what he needs. Elena set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. I don't know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. Victor stood, suddenly needing distance before he said too much, revealed too much. What time did the hospital say we could pick him up? 10 a.m. Dr. Morrison wants to do a final check first. Elena glanced at the clock. We have 4 hours. Then you should try to eat something. Keep your strength up. Victor moved to the refrigerator. What sounds good? I'm not really hungry. Elena. Victor turned back to her. Please, let me take care of you, at least in the basic ways. You're still recovering from major surgery. She hesitated, then relented. Toast, maybe, with jam, and some fruit if you have it. Victor prepared breakfast while Elena sat at the counter, both of them moving around the careful boundaries they'd established. It felt almost domestic, this quiet morning routine, and Victor had to remind himself not to get comfortable with it. Elena was here because she had no choice, because his world had forced her hand. The moment the threat passed, she'd leave, and he'd have to let her go. But for now, for this moment, he could pretend they were something other than two people bound together by blood and history and a child neither of them had planned for. They ate in companionable silence, the tension from earlier conversations easing into something almost comfortable. Elena finished her toast and most of the fruit, color returning to her face as the food and coffee worked their magic. I should get dressed, she said finally, sliding off the stool. Look somewhat presentable for bringing my son home. You look fine, Victor said, then caught himself. I mean, you look tired, which is normal considering everything, but… Victor… Elena's lips twitched with what might have been amusement. It's okay. I know I look like hell. Major surgery and no sleep will do that. After she left, Victor stood alone in the kitchen and allowed himself a moment of weakness. His hands were shaking again, nerves and anticipation making his usually steady control waver. In a few hours, Alessandro would be here, in this home, under this roof, and Victor would have to figure out how to be a father while keeping both Elena and their son safe from a world that wanted to use them as weapons. He'd faced impossible odds before. Built an empire from nothing, survived assassination attempts and hostile takeovers and wars that had left better men dead. But this felt different. This felt like the kind of challenge where failure meant losing everything that actually mattered. At 9:30, Elena emerged from the East Wing wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes look darker. She'd done something with her hair, pulled it back in a way that was both practical and pretty, and she'd put on minimal makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion but made her look more like herself. "Ready?" Victor asked. Elena took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to the hospital was quiet. Dmitri drove with 2 security vehicles flanking them, the formation tight and professional. Victor noticed Elena watching the escort with troubled eyes. "Is this going to be normal?" she asked. "The guards, the protocols, all of it." "Until I'm certain Castellano is honoring our agreement, yes." Victor kept his voice gentle. "After that we can scale back, but Elena, even then, Alessandro will always need some level of protection. He's my son, my heir. That makes him valuable to people who would use him against me." "I hate this," Elena said quietly. "I hate that he was born into a world where he needs bodyguards before he even comes home from the hospital." "I know, I hate it too." Victor wanted to reach for her hand to offer physical comfort, but he kept his hands to himself. "If I could change it, but you can't. This is who you are, what you are." Elena turned to look at him. "The question is whether who you are is compatible with being the father Alessandro needs." "I'm going to try to be." Victor met her challenging gaze. "I know I'll make mistakes. I know there will be times when my world conflicts with his needs. But Elena, I swear to you, I will always choose him first. Always." Elena's expression was unreadable. "We'll see." Mercy Hospital's NICU was different today. Janet greeted them at the entrance with a warm smile and a clipboard full of discharge paperwork. "Your boy's all ready to go home," she said, handing the clipboard to Elena. "Just need signatures on these forms, and Dr. Morrison wants to talk to you both about care instructions." Elena's hands shook slightly as she signed the papers. Victor wanted to steady them, to absorb some of her anxiety, but he stayed back and let her handle it. This was her moment, bringing her son home for the first time. Dr. Morrison appeared with Alessandro in her arms, the baby wrapped in a blue blanket and wearing a tiny knit cap. Victor's breath caught. His son looked so small against the doctor's frame, so impossibly fragile. "He's been a perfect patient," Dr. Morrison said, settling Alessandro into Elena's arms. "Eating well, maintaining temperature, all his vitals stable. You've got a strong little fighter here." Elena cradled Alessandro against her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "Hi, sweet boy. Mama's taking you home now." Victor stood frozen, watching mother and son together for the first time outside the clinical environment of the hospital. Elena looked complete in a way she hadn't before, like some essential part of her had been missing until this moment. "Mr. DeLuca," Dr. Morrison pulled him aside while Elena cooed over Alessandro. "A word?" They stepped into the hallway. The doctor's expression was serious. "Alessandro is healthy, but he's also 6 days old and was born under traumatic circumstances," she began. "The next few weeks are critical for his development. He needs stability, routine, and minimal stress." "We understand," Victor said. "I'm not sure you do." Dr. Morrison's voice sharpened. "I don't know the details of your relationship with Ms. Hart, and frankly, it's not my business. But that baby deserves a peaceful home environment. Whatever conflicts exist between you two, whatever history you're dealing with, put it aside, for his sake." Victor absorbed the criticism without defense. "We will. I give you my word." "And the security situation?" Janet mentioned armed guards, surveillance concerns. "It's being handled." Victor's voice was firm. "Alessandro and Elena are safe. That's my priority." Dr. Morrison studied him for a long moment. "All right. But if I have any concerns about his welfare, I won't hesitate to involve child services. Understood?" "Perfectly." Victor respected her fierce protectiveness even as it stung. "We want what's best for him too, Doctor. We might not agree on what that looks like, but we're on the same side." They returned to find Elena signing the last of the discharge papers, Alessandro sleeping peacefully in her arms. Janet had prepared a diaper bag stuffed with supplies and instructions. And she walked them through the basics one more time with the patience of someone who'd seen 1,000 nervous new parents. "Call us if you have any questions," Janet said as they headed for the elevator. "Day or night, we're here." The walk through the hospital to the parking garage felt surreal. Victor watched Elena navigate with Alessandro, her entire body curved protectively around their son, and felt something shift in his chest. This was his family. Broken, complicated, held together by necessity rather than choice, but his. Dmitri had the SUV waiting with the rear door open. Victor had insisted on installing a car seat yesterday, spending 2 hours with the instruction manual to make sure every strap and buckle was perfect. Now Elena slid into the back seat with Alessandro, securing him with shaking hands. "Is this right?" she asked Victor, uncertainty clear in her voice. "The straps, do they look tight enough?" Victor checked the installation carefully. "It's perfect. He's safe." The drive back to the penthouse took 20 minutes, every second of which Elena spent watching Alessandro with the kind of intensity that suggested she was afraid he might disappear if she looked away. Victor sat in the passenger seat, watching them both in the rearview mirror, and tried to memorize this moment, the first time he'd brought his son home. The building's underground garage had been cleared in advance. No other vehicles, no civilians, just Victor's security team creating a protective corridor from the SUV to the private elevator. Elena barely seemed to notice the precautions, too focused on Alessandro to care about the armed guards. The elevator ride up felt eternal. Alessandro started to fuss, making small sounds of distress that immediately had Elena whispering reassurances and adjusting his blanket. Victor watched her natural maternal instinct kick in and felt inadequate by comparison. What did he know about comforting a crying baby? About soothing fears or meeting needs? "He's probably hungry," Elena said as the elevator doors opened to the penthouse. "I should feed him." "The East Wing is all set up," Victor reminded her. "Everything you need should be there." They made their way through the penthouse, Elena carrying Alessandro with Victor hovering nearby like a useless satellite. When they reached the East Wing, Elena went straight to the nursery and settled into the rocking chair with practiced ease, preparing to nurse. Victor started to leave to give her privacy, but Elena's voice stopped him. "You can stay," she said quietly. "If you want. You should be part of this." Victor's throat tightened. "Are you sure?" "No," Elena admitted with a tired laugh. "But we're figuring this out as we go, right? And he's your son, too. You should see how to care for him." So Victor stayed, standing awkwardly in the doorway while Elena nursed Alessandro with the kind of natural grace that suggested she'd been doing this for years instead of days. The baby ate hungrily, his tiny hands kneading against Elena's chest, his dark eyes occasionally opening to look around at this new environment. "He's perfect," Victor said, the words inadequate but true. "He is." Elena's voice was thick with emotion. "I can't believe he's really here. Really ours." Ours. The word settled over Victor like a benediction. When Alessandro finished eating, Elena showed Victor how to burp him, the proper way to support his head and pat his back. The baby let out a tiny burp that made them both laugh, the sound startling in its normalcy. "Your turn to hold him," Elena said, standing carefully and offering Alessandro to Victor. Victor's hands trembled as he accepted the warm weight of his son. Alessandro was so small, so fragile, and Victor was acutely aware of all the violence these hands had committed, all the damage they'd done. But Alessandro didn't know about any of that. He just nestled against Victor's chest with absolute trust, his breathing evening out as he drifted back to sleep. "I've got you," Victor whispered. "Promise, I've got you." Elena watched them with an expression Victor couldn't quite read, longing and fear and something that might have been hope all tangled together. "I'm going to try to nap while he sleeps," she said. "The nurse said to sleep when the baby sleeps, and I'm exhausted." "Good idea. I'll keep him with me for a while, let you rest." Victor carefully carried Alessandro to the rocking chair and settled in. "If he needs you, I'll wake you immediately." Elena hesitated at the doorway to her bedroom. "Victor, thank you. For everything. I know this is complicated, but thank you for trying."
You don't have to thank me for caring about my son, Victor said softly, or for caring about you. Elena's breath caught, but she didn't respond. She just retreated into her bedroom and closed the door, leaving Victor alone with Alessandro. The afternoon passed in a strange, suspended peace. Victor sat in the nursery rocking chair, holding his sleeping son, watching sunlight move across the floor as the hours progressed. He'd never felt so simultaneously content and terrified. Everything he was, everything he'd built, it all felt suddenly fragile in the face of this tiny life that depended on him. Around 3, Alessandro woke crying. Victor tried soothing him with gentle words and rocking, but the cries only intensified. Panic started to set in. What was wrong? Was he hungry? Hurt? Sick? Elena appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep. He needs to eat again every 2 to 3 hours at this age. She took Alessandro and settled back into the nursing routine while Victor watched and learned and tried to absorb everything. This was his life now. Feeding schedules and diaper changes and the particular pitch of his son's cry that meant hunger versus discomfort. You should rest too, Elena said when Alessandro had been changed and was drifting off again. You were up all night dealing with Castellano. I'm fine. Victor, Elena's voice was firm. You're no good to us exhausted. Go sleep for a few hours. I'll wake you if I need anything. It was the closest Elena had come to acknowledging that they were in this together, that she trusted him enough to rely on. Victor nodded and retreated to his own bedroom, setting an alarm for 2 hours just in case. He woke to darkness and the sound of crying. For a disoriented moment, Victor couldn't place the sound. Then reality crashed back. Alessandro. He was crying, and Elena. Victor was out of bed and heading for the east wing before conscious thought kicked in. He found Elena in the nursery, tears streaming down her face as she tried to soothe a screaming Alessandro. I don't know what's wrong, she said, voice breaking. I've fed him, changed him, checked everything, but he won't stop crying and I don't know what to do. Victor took in the scene, Elena's exhaustion, her post-surgical pain that she was clearly pushing through, the baby's distress. He moved forward and gently took Alessandro from her arms. Sit down before you hurt yourself, he said firmly. Let me try. Elena sank into the rocking chair while Victor walked slow circles around the nursery, holding Alessandro against his chest and humming a melody he didn't consciously remember learning. His mother's song, he realized distantly. Something she'd sung to him decades ago, before violence and empire had consumed his world. Gradually, miraculously, Alessandro's cries quieted to whimpers and then to silence. The baby nestled against Victor's shoulder, his tiny body relaxing as exhaustion finally won out. How did you... Elena stared at them in amazement. I have no idea, Victor admitted. Pure luck, probably. But Elena was crying again, and this time not from frustration. I can't do this, she whispered. I'm his mother. I'm supposed to know how to comfort him, and I can't even... Hey! Victor carefully lowered himself to sit on the floor beside her chair, Alessandro still asleep against his chest. You're doing amazing. He's 6 days old, Elena. You're learning. We both are. But you're a natural at it. Elena gestured helplessly at the sleeping baby. Look at him. He trusts you completely. He trusts you too. He just needed something different in that moment. Victor shifted so he could meet her eyes. This isn't a competition, Elena. We're both his parents. Sometimes he'll need you, sometimes he'll need me, and that's okay. Elena wiped her eyes, managing a watery smile. When did you get so wise about parenting? About 5 minutes ago. Victor returned the smile. I'm making this up as I go, same as you. They sat together on the nursery floor, Victor holding their sleeping son while Elena recovered from her emotional breakdown. Outside the windows, the city sparkled with evening lights, indifferent to the small miracle happening in this room. I'm scared, Elena admitted after a long silence. Not just of being a bad mother. I'm scared of what happens next, of this arrangement, of whether I can trust you, of whether bringing Alessandro into your world was the biggest mistake I could have made. Victor wanted to promise her it would all work out, that everything would be fine, but he'd learned the hard way that promises didn't mean much without proof. I'm scared too, he said instead. Terrified, actually.
But Elena, we're in this together now, whether we like it or not, and I'd rather face it scared with you than try to handle it alone. Elena looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Okay, she said finally. Together. But Victor, if you ever give me reason to regret this, if you ever make me feel the way you did 3 years ago, I'll let you walk away, Victor finished. No fight, no pursuit. You and Alessandro will be free to go, I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm not. Victor's voice was absolute. Your happiness and Alessandro's safety matter more than my wants. I mean that, Elena, with everything I am. The moment stretched between them, fragile and weighted with possibility. Then Alessandro stirred, making small sounds that suggested he might wake again, and the spell broke. Here. Victor carefully transferred the baby back to Elena's arms. You should try to sleep while he's down. I'll stay close, handle the next feeding if he needs a bottle. Elena cradled Alessandro against her chest, looking at Victor with an expression that might have been the beginning of trust. You're really trying, aren't you, to be better than you were? Every day, Victor said quietly. For as long as it takes. He left the nursery and returned to his own room, but sleep was impossible now. Instead, Victor stood at the windows and looked out over his empire, seeing it differently than he ever had before. All of this, the power, the money, the territory. What did any of it matter compared to the tiny life sleeping in the room down the hall? He'd spent 3 years building walls around his heart, convinced that Elena's loss had taught him the dangers of attachment. But Alessandro had shattered those walls in 6 days, proven that love wasn't weakness, but the most dangerous kind of strength. And if Victor wasn't careful, if he didn't guard against it, he was going to fall in love with Elena all over again. Not the idealized memory of who she'd been, but the fierce, damaged, beautiful woman she'd become. The mother of his child. The one person who'd survived his cruelty and somehow emerged stronger. It would be the worst possible decision. Elena would never forgive him completely. Never trust him the way she once had. They were bound together by biology and circumstance, not choice. Any feelings beyond co-parenting would only complicate an already impossible situation. But Victor had never been particularly good at making smart decisions when his heart was involved. The night wore on. Around midnight, Alessandro woke crying again. Victor heard Elena moving in the east wing, heard her soft voice soothing their son. He stayed in his room, giving her space to handle it, trusting that she'd call if she needed help. The next feeding, around 3 a.m., Elena did call. Victor, can you come here? He found her in the nursery, Alessandro in her arms and pain written clearly across her face. What's wrong? My incision, Elena said through gritted teeth. I moved wrong getting him out of the bassinet. It hurts, and I need you to take him while I take some pain medication. Victor accepted Alessandro and watched with concern as Elena moved stiffly to the bathroom. She emerged a few minutes later having taken medication, but still pale and obviously hurting. You should be resting more, Victor said, not pushing yourself like this. He's 6 days old, Victor. He needs constant care. I can't just rest. Elena lowered herself carefully back into the rocking chair. Besides, this is what motherhood is. You push through the pain because your child needs you. Then let me help more. Let me take some of the burden. Victor sat on the ottoman, facing her. I'm here, Elena. Use me. She looked at him with tired eyes. Why are you being so nice? So patient? The Victor I knew would have hired a night nurse by now and demanded I follow a schedule he'd designed. The Victor you knew was an idiot, Victor repeated his earlier assessment, and he didn't have a son who needed him to be better. Elena's expression softened. He's changing you, Alessandro. I can see it. You both are, Victor admitted. Every day, every moment, you're changing me into someone I should have been all along. The conversation was interrupted by Alessandro's demands for food. Elena took him back and began nursing while Victor watched, mesmerized by the simple intimacy of mother and child. Stay, Elena said when she noticed him preparing to leave. Talk to me. Keep me awake. I'm so tired I'm afraid I'll fall asleep while feeding him. So Victor stayed, and they talked.
About nothing important at first, the weather, the building's amenities, whether the nursery needed better blackout curtains. But gradually, as the night wore on and exhaustion lowered their defenses, the conversation deepened. Elena told him about the 3 years after she'd left, the struggle to rebuild her identity, to trust anyone again, the loneliness of pregnancy without support, the fear of raising a child alone, the moment she'd decided to list Victor as Alessandro's father, despite knowing it would expose her. I told myself it was practical, she said, that if something happened to me, he deserved to know his father. But maybe part of me wanted you to find out, wanted to see if you'd changed, if you'd care. I would have come sooner if I'd known, Victor said. The moment I found out you were pregnant, I know. That's why I didn't tell you. Elena adjusted Alessandro, who was drifting back to sleep. I was so angry, Victor, so hurt. The idea of you being part of my pregnancy, having opinions about my body and my choices, I couldn't handle it. I understand. And he did. How could he blame her for wanting to keep the one pure thing in her life away from the man who'd destroyed her? But now you're here anyway, Elena continued, and you're trying so hard. And I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to do anything, Victor said. Just let me be here. Let me help when you need it and give you space when you don't. No expectations, no demands. Just presence. Elena met his eyes across the sleeping baby. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it, what you did 3 years ago? Victor didn't hesitate. Every single day. It's the biggest mistake of my life, and I'd give anything to take it back. But you can't. No, I can't. Victor's voice was rough with emotion. All I can do is try to be better now. Try to earn a fraction of the trust I destroyed, and hope that someday, somehow, you'll believe that I've changed. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I want to believe it, she said finally. I want to believe people can change, that damage can be repaired. But Victor, I'm so scared of trusting you again, of letting my guard down and getting hurt all over again. Then don't trust me yet, Victor said. Keep your guard up, protect yourself, just don't shut me out completely. Give me chances to prove myself, even small ones. Let me show you through actions instead of words. Okay, Elena whispered. Okay, I can do that. Dawn was breaking when Alessandro finally settled into deeper sleep, and Elena felt safe enough to transfer him back to the bassinet. She stood at the nursery window, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of pink and gold. First full night home, she said. We survived. We did more than survive, Victor said, coming to stand beside her. We did well. You did well. Elena turned to look at him, really look at him, and for the first time in 3 years, her gaze held something other than hurt or anger or fear. It held possibility. One day at a time, she said, echoing her earlier words. We'll figure this out one day at a time. One day at a time, Victor agreed. And as the sun rose over the city, casting light into the nursery where their son slept peacefully, Victor allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at building something real from the ruins of what they'd destroyed. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of feeding schedules and diaper changes, and the particular exhaustion that came from caring for a newborn. Victor found himself living in 20-minute increments, always listening for Alessandro's cries, always ready to help Elena however she needed. He'd never been so tired in his life. He'd also never been so content. On Alessandro's 9th day home, Elena's incision started bleeding. Victor found her in the bathroom at 2 a.m, pale and shaking, blood seeping through her pajama pants. She looked up at him with eyes wide with fear. Something's wrong, she whispered. Victor, something's really wrong. He didn't panic, couldn't afford to. How much bleeding? I don't know, more than there should be. Elena pressed a towel against her abdomen, wincing. It hurts. It didn't hurt before, but now... Victor was already on his phone, calling the emergency medical line Dr. Chen had provided. The on-call physician answered within 3 rings. This is Victor DeLuca. Elena Hart, post-cesarean patient, 9 days out from surgery. She's experiencing bleeding from the incision site and increased pain. The doctor asked questions. Victor relayed them to Elena, who answered through gritted teeth. When he hung up, his face was grim. We need to go to the hospital, now. They think it might be an infection or a separation of the internal sutures. But, Alessandro,
Elena's voice broke. I can't leave him. He's coming with us. Dmitri! Victor raised his voice, knowing his second would hear through the intercom system. Get the car ready. Medical emergency. Everything moved fast after that. Dmitri appeared with the security team. Victor gathered Alessandro while Elena pressed the towel against her bleeding incision. They were in the SUV within 5 minutes, racing through pre-dawn streets toward Mercy Hospital. Elena held Alessandro in the back seat, tears streaming down her face. This is my fault. I've been pushing too hard, not resting enough. This isn't your fault, Victor said firmly from the front seat. Sometimes complications happen. That's why we're getting you to the hospital. But fear clawed at his chest. He'd just gotten them home, just started building something that resembled a family. The idea of losing Elena now, after everything? The emergency room staff was ready when they arrived, Dr. Chen herself waiting at the entrance despite the ungodly hour. She took one look at Elena and immediately ordered her onto a gurney. Mr. DeLuca, you'll need to take the baby to the waiting area while we examine her, Dr. Chen said, already moving. This could take a while. Victor wanted to argue, to demand he be allowed to stay with Elena, but Alessandro started crying, as if sensing the tension, and Elena looked at Victor with pleading eyes. Keep him safe, she whispered. Gia, please. I promise. Victor cradled Alessandro closer. And you're going to be fine. You have to be fine. They wheeled Elena away, leaving Victor standing in the emergency room with a screaming infant and a terror he hadn't felt since the night of the storm. The waiting room was harsh with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs. Victor tried everything to soothe Alessandro, rocking, humming, the bottle of expressed milk Elena had prepared before everything went wrong. Nothing worked. The baby cried and cried, his little face red with distress, and Victor felt increasingly helpless. Sir? A nurse approached cautiously. Is there anything we can help with? He won't stop crying, Victor said, hearing the edge of desperation in his own voice. His mother usually nurses him, but she's... Let me try. The nurse held out her arms. Sometimes babies just need a different touch. Victor handed Alessandro over, feeling like he was failing some fundamental test of fatherhood. The nurse walked slow circles, murmuring soothing nonsense, and gradually Alessandro's cries quieted to whimpers. There we go, she said gently. He's just scared. He can sense when his parents are anxious. Parents. The words settled over Victor like a weight and a benediction all at once. He was Alessandro's parent, not just his father in name, but a person this tiny human depended on for comfort and safety and love. And right now, he was failing spectacularly. An hour passed, then 2. Victor alternated between holding Alessandro and pacing the waiting room, his phone clutched in his hand in case Dr. Chen called with updates. Dmitri brought coffee that Victor couldn't drink and offered reassurances that rang hollow. Finally, at 5 in the morning, Dr. Chen appeared in the waiting room doorway. Victor stood immediately. How is she? Stable, Dr. Chen said, and Victor's knees nearly buckled with relief. It was a partial separation of the internal sutures, complicated by a minor infection. We've cleaned the wound, started antibiotics, and reinforced the closure. She's going to need to stay here for observation, probably 48 hours minimum. But she'll be okay? Victor needed to hear it again. Yes, but Mr. DeLuca, she's been pushing herself too hard. Her body needs rest to heal, and caring for a newborn doesn't allow for that. Dr. Chen's expression was stern. When she's discharged, she's going to need help. Real help, not just someone checking in occasionally. She'll have it, Victor promised. Whatever she needs. Good. You can see her now, but keep it brief. She needs to sleep. Victor followed Dr. Chen through the hospital corridors, Alessandro sleeping finally in his arms. They'd moved Elena to a private room on the surgical floor. She looked small in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm and monitors tracking her vitals. But she was awake, and when she saw Victor with Alessandro, her entire face transformed with relief. Is he okay? She asked immediately. He's fine. Exhausted from crying, but fine. Victor moved closer to the bed. Elena, you scared the hell out of me. I scared myself. Her hand moved to her abdomen where fresh bandages covered the repaired incision. The doctor said I've been overdoing it, that I need to rest more. Then that's what you'll do. Victor's voice was firm. No arguments. When you come home, you're going to let me handle more. Let me take night feedings with bottles so you can sleep. Let me do the practical things while you recover. But I'm his mother, and you'll be no good to him if you end up back in the hospital with a serious infection. Victor sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Elena, please, let me help you, really help you, not just hovering nearby while you do everything yourself. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to not do everything myself. For 3 years, I've had to be completely self-sufficient. Trusting someone else to help feels terrifying, Victor supplied. I know, but you're not alone anymore. You have me. Whether you want me or not, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. What if I start to rely on you and you disappoint me again? The question hit Victor square in the chest. Then you'll survive it, like you survived before. But Elena, I'm not that man anymore. I can't be, because Alessandro needs me to be better. You need me to be better. And for the first time in my life, I want to be better for reasons that have nothing to do with power or control. Elena reached out with her free hand. Victor took it carefully, mindful of the IV. I'm so tired of being strong all the time, she whispered, of having to handle everything alone, of being scared and hurt and angry. Then don't be, Victor said softly. Let me be strong for both of us for a while. Let me carry some of the weight. They sat in silence, hands linked, Alessandro sleeping peacefully in Victor's arms. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over the city for the second time in their strange new life together. Okay, Elena said finally. Okay, I'll try. But Victor, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't make me fall in love with you again just to break my heart. Her voice was barely audible. I couldn't survive that twice. Victor's breath caught. Elena, I can feel it happening, she continued, not meeting his eyes. The way you are with Alessandro, how gentle you've been with me, how hard you're trying. It's breaking down all my defenses. And I'm terrified that I'm going to let myself love you again, and you're going to... I won't! Victor's voice was absolute. Elena, look at me. She did, her eyes red and vulnerable. I destroyed us once because I was too damaged to trust, too paranoid to see what was real, Victor said. I have spent 3 years living with that mistake, and it nearly killed me. I'm not that man anymore. I can't be, because losing you taught me what matters and what doesn't. And if you give me another chance, if you let yourself trust me again, I swear on Alessandro's life that I will never, never hurt you like that again. How can you be sure? Elena's voice broke. How can you promise that when you were so certain before? Because before, I thought strength meant never being vulnerable, never trusting, never letting anyone close enough to hurt me. Victor shifted Alessandro to one arm so he could cup Elena's face with his free hand. But you taught me that real strength is choosing to trust even when you've been hurt, even when it's terrifying, and I'm choosing to trust that we can build something better from what we destroyed. I want to believe you, Elena whispered. I want to so badly. Then believe me. Victor's thumb brushed away her tears. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Just give me chances to prove it, one day at a time, like you said. Elena closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. One day at a time, she repeated. A nurse knocked on the door, interrupting the moment. I'm sorry, but Ms. Hart needs to rest now. You can come back during visiting hours. Victor stood reluctantly. I'll bring Alessandro back this afternoon. Try to sleep. Victor? Elena caught his hand before he could leave. Thank you for being here, for all of it. He wanted to tell her he loved her. The words sat on his tongue, ready to be spoken. But it was too soon, too much, too risky when Elena was vulnerable and medicated and overwhelmed. So instead he said, Always. I'll always be here. The next 48 hours were brutal. Victor managed Alessandro alone for the first time, discovering just how difficult Elena had made it look. Feeding every 3 hours. Diaper changes that seemed endless.
the mysterious crying that no amount of rocking or singing or desperate pleading could solve. He called Elena's hospital room more times than he could count, asking panicked questions about whether Alessandro's poop color was normal, or if he was eating enough, or why he wouldn't sleep for more than 20 minutes at a time. Elena talked him through each crisis with patience that Victor didn't deserve, and when he brought Alessandro to visit her each afternoon, she'd take the baby with such obvious relief and love that Victor's chest ached. "You're doing great," she told him on the second day, watching him fumble through a diaper change. "Really? Most fathers wouldn't even try." "Most fathers didn't spend 3 years without knowing their child existed," Victor said. "I have time to make up for." On the third day, Dr. Chen cleared Elena for discharge with strict instructions about rest and limited activity. Victor brought her home to a penthouse that had been transformed by Dimitri's efficiency, meal services arranged, cleaning scheduled, and a baby nurse on standby in case they needed help. Elena looked at the preparations with something between gratitude and overwhelm. "This is too much, Victor." "It's exactly enough," he countered. "You're recovering from surgery and infection. You need support." "But I can't afford—" "You're not paying for any of it," Victor said firmly. "Elena, please, let me do this. Let me take care of you both." She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. "Okay, for now, until I'm healed." The days that followed established a new rhythm. Victor handled night feedings with bottles so Elena could sleep. The baby nurse came during the day to help while Elena rested and recovered. Slowly, carefully, they built something that resembled partnership. And somewhere in the 2 a.m. feedings and the shared exhaustion and the quiet moments watching Alessandro sleep, the walls between Victor and Elena began to crumble. 2 weeks after Elena's emergency hospital visit, Victor found her crying in the nursery. "What's wrong?" He immediately went on alert, checking Alessandro in his bassinet. "Is he sick? Are you in pain?" "No, I'm—" Elena laughed through her tears. "I'm being ridiculous. It's just— look at him. Look how much he's grown already. He's 2.5 weeks old and he's already different than the day we brought him home." Victor looked at Alessandro, seeing what Elena meant. Their son had filled out, his face less scrunched, his movements more purposeful. He was changing daily, growing into himself. "They grow fast," Victor said softly. "Too fast." "I don't want to miss any of it." Elena wiped her eyes. "And I'm terrified that I'm going to blink, and he'll be grown, and I'll have wasted this time being scared or angry or stuck in the past." Victor understood what she was really saying, that holding on to hurt meant missing joy, that the past was stealing the present. "Then let it go," he said quietly. "The fear, the anger, let it go, Elena." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were full of longing and terror in equal measure. "What if I let it go and you hurt me again? Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning back what I destroyed." Victor moved closer, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "But Elena, I need you to know, I'm not asking you to forgive and forget. I'm asking you to forgive and move forward, to build something new instead of trying to resurrect what died." "What are you saying?" Elena's voice was barely audible. "I'm saying I'm in love with you." The words came out raw and honest. Not with who you were 3 years ago, but with who you are now. With the fierce mother who fought through surgery and infection to care for our son. With the woman who trusted me enough to let me into her home, even though I'd given her every reason not to. With the person who's strong enough to consider forgiveness, even when it would be easier to hate me. Elena's breath hitched. "Victor, I know it's too soon," he continued. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. But Elena, I'm standing here at 2 a.m. in a nursery we share, watching our son sleep, and I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend this is just co-parenting or a temporary arrangement or anything other than what it is." "And what is it?" Elena asked, tears streaming down her face. "A second chance." Victor's voice broke. "A chance to do everything right that I did wrong before. A chance to build the family we should have had. A chance to love you the way you deserve to be loved, without suspicion, without cruelty, without anything except complete trust and devotion." Elena stared at him, and Victor could see the war playing out in her expression. Fear versus hope, past versus future,
Safety versus risk. I'm terrified, she whispered. I know. I don't trust easily anymore. You destroyed that part of me. I know. And if I let myself love you again, if I give you this chance, her voice broke completely. Victor, I need you to understand. There won't be a third chance. This is it. If you hurt me again, we're done. Co-parenting from a distance, legal agreements, complete separation. I won't survive being destroyed by you twice. Then I'll make sure once is enough, Victor said. Elena, I'm asking you to trust me with your heart again. I know I broke it before. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking anyway, because the alternative, spending the rest of our lives circling each other, raising Alessandro in a house divided, that's not living. That's just existing. Elena closed her eyes, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. How do I do this? How do I let go of 3 years of hurt? One day at a time, Victor said, echoing her words back to her. Some days will be easier than others. Some days you'll remember what I did and hate me for it. But I'm asking you to try, to give us a real chance instead of just going through the motions. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Alessandro's soft breathing from the bassinet. Finally, Elena opened her eyes and looked at Victor with an expression that was equal parts fear and courage. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we can try. Really try. Not just co-parenting, but she took a shaky breath. Building something real. Relief crashed over Victor with physical force. You mean it? I'm terrified, and this is probably a huge mistake, but yes, I mean it. Elena's smile was tremulous. You were right about one thing. I don't want to miss Alessandro's childhood being stuck in anger and fear. And I don't want to teach him that love means staying broken. Victor moved closer, slowly, giving Elena every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands with a gentleness that contradicted every violent thing he'd ever done. I love you, he said again, needing her to hear it, and I'm going to spend every day proving it. Don't make promises yet, Elena said, but she was leaning into his touch. Just show me, through actions, through choices. Show me you've changed. I will. Victor brushed his thumb across her cheek, catching tears. Starting right now, starting with this, I'm selling my operations. Elena's eyes widened. What? The criminal enterprises, the illegal dealings, all of it. I'm selling to Dimitri and going legitimate. Victor had been planning this for days, but saying it out loud made it real. I can't be the father Alessandro needs while running an empire built on violence. And I can't be the man you deserve while my hands are covered in blood. Victor, that's your entire life. No. His voice was firm. You and Alessandro are my life now. Everything else is just business, and I'm choosing you, choosing this family, choosing to build something better. Elena was crying harder now, but the tears looked different, lighter somehow. You'd really walk away from everything you built? In a heartbeat. Victor meant it absolutely. What good is an empire if I'm alone in it? What's the point of power if the two people who matter most are afraid of what I am? I don't know what to say, Elena whispered. Say you'll give me a chance to prove it. Say you'll let me court you properly this time. Dates, conversation, building something real instead of just falling into bed and hoping compatibility follows. Despite the tears, Elena laughed. Did you just say court? I'm trying to be romantic, Victor defended. I'm new at this. Cut me some slack. Okay? Elena's smile was genuine now, transforming her face. Okay, yes, you can court me. But Victor, slow. We go slow. We build trust before we build anything else. As slow as you need, Victor promised. I've waited 3 years. I can wait however long it takes. Alessandro chose that moment to wake with a cry, his timing impeccable as always. Elena laughed and moved to pick him up, but Victor stopped her. Let me, he said. You rest. Doctor's orders. He lifted Alessandro from the bassinet, settling the baby against his shoulder with growing confidence. Their son's cries quieted immediately, replaced by the small sounds of contentment that meant all his needs were met. Elena watched them with an expression Victor couldn't quite name. Love, certainly, but also hope. The fragile, tentative hope of someone choosing to trust again despite every reason not to. "We're really doing this," she said. "All of it. The family thing." "If you'll have me," Victor confirmed. "One day at a time," Elena said for what felt like the 100th time. But now it sounded less like a warning and more like a promise. The weeks that followed transformed everything. Victor began the process of legitimizing his business holdings, selling his illegal operations to Dmitri in a deal that shocked the entire criminal underworld. Word spread that Victor DeLuca was going straight, choosing family over power. Some thought he'd gone soft, others thought it was a strategic move. But Victor didn't care what they thought. He cared about coming home to Elena and Alessandro without blood on his hands. He cared about building a life his son could be proud of. Elena healed both physically and emotionally. The infection cleared, the incision finally closed properly, and she grew stronger daily. More importantly, the walls she'd built around her heart began to come down, brick by careful brick. Victor courted her like they were strangers meeting for the first time. Flowers delivered to the East Wing, coffee made exactly how she liked it. Quiet conversations after Alessandro fell asleep. He learned her all over again, her current dreams, her fears, the person she'd become in the years apart. And Elena learned him too. Discovered that underneath the violence and paranoia, Victor was capable of gentleness, that he could change nappies and warm bottles and sing lullabies without losing an ounce of his strength, that choosing vulnerability over control was its own kind of courage. 2 months after Alessandro came home, Elena made a decision. She found Victor in his office, reviewing contracts for a legitimate real estate venture. He looked up when she entered, automatically smiling at the sight of her. "Hey, Alessandro down for his nap?" "Finally." Elena closed the door behind her. "I need to talk to you about something." Victor's expression immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Elena took a breath. "I want to move. Into the main part of the penthouse. With you." Victor stared at her, not quite believing what he'd heard. "You want to share your space, your bedroom, your life, really." Elena twisted her hands together. "I mean, if you want that too. If I'm not misreading what's been happening between us." Victor was out of his chair and across the room before conscious thought engaged. He caught Elena's hands in his, holding tight. "You're not misreading anything," he said. "Elena, I want that more than I can express. But are you sure? We agreed to go slow." "We have been going slow," Elena interrupted. 2 months of dating and rebuilding trust. "But Victor, I wake up every morning and wish you were in the bed next to me. I put Alessandro to sleep every night and want to share it with you instead of retreating to separate wings. I'm tired of pretending we're just co-parents when we're clearly so much more." "What are we?" Victor asked, needing to hear her say it. Elena's smile was radiant. "We're a family. A real one. Messy and complicated, and still healing, but real. And I love you, Victor. I fought it for weeks, told myself it was too soon, too risky. But I can't fight it anymore. I love you." Victor pulled her against his chest, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I love you too. So much it terrifies me." They stood in his office, wrapped around each other, while Alessandro slept peacefully in the nursery and the city continued its chaos beyond the windows. Everything Victor had built, the empire, the reputation, the power, none of it compared to this moment, to holding Elena and knowing she'd chosen to trust him again. "So we do this," Elena said against his chest. "We build a real life together, for Alessandro and for us." "We do this," Victor confirmed. "And Elena, thank you for giving me another chance, for seeing past what I was to what I'm trying to become. Thank you for being worth the risk," Elena said. That night, they moved Elena's things from the East Wing into Victor's bedroom. It was practical and symbolic all at once, joining their lives, their spaces, their futures. Alessandro's nursery became the room next to theirs, close enough to hear him cry but far enough to give them privacy. And when they finally lay in bed together that night, Alessandro sleeping peacefully nearby, Victor felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. "I'm scared," Elena whispered in the darkness. "This is everything I wanted, but I'm still scared." "Me too," Victor admitted.
Scared I'll mess this up. Scared I don't deserve this happiness. Scared that something will come along and destroy what we're building. Then we'll be scared together, Elena said, and we'll keep choosing each other anyway, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard, Victor agreed. 3 months later, on a morning that felt like any other, Victor woke to find Elena watching him sleep. Creepy, he murmured, smiling. How long have you been doing that? Long enough to be sure, Elena said. Sure of what? She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. That this is real, that we're really building a life together, that I'm ready for the next step. Victor's heart kicked against his ribs. Elena, marry me, she said simply. No grand gesture, no elaborate proposal. Just marry me, Victor. Choose me and Alessandro forever. Make it official. Victor stared at her, seeing everything they'd survived reflected in her eyes. The pain and the healing, the destruction and the rebuilding, the death of who they'd been and the birth of who they'd become. Yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you, today, tomorrow, whenever you want. I'll marry you and spend the rest of my life proving it was the right choice. Elena's smile could have lit the entire city. Good, because Alessandro needs his parents to be a team, and I need to know you're committed to this. To us. I've been committed since the moment you agreed to try again, Victor said. Since before that, really. Since the night I gave blood to save you and realized nothing else mattered. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the penthouse, with Alessandro in Elena's arms and only Dimitri and a handful of close friends as witnesses. Elena wore a simple dress. Victor wore a suit that cost more than most people's cars but felt inadequate for the occasion. When the officiant pronounced them married, Victor kissed his wife with a tenderness that would have shocked anyone who'd known him before. This was who he was now, a husband, a father, a man who'd chosen love over power and found it was the strongest thing he'd ever held. The reception was quiet, intimate, nothing like the elaborate affairs Victor had attended in his criminal days. Just good food, good company, and the overwhelming sense that they'd finally gotten it right. Late that night, after the guests had left and Alessandro had been put to bed, Victor and Elena stood at the penthouse windows looking out over the city. Do you regret it? Elena asked quietly. Everything you gave up to be here? Victor thought about the question seriously. The empire he'd sold, the power he'd surrendered, the life he'd built over decades, all traded for this, a wife, a son, and a legitimate business that would never command the same fear or respect. Not for a second, he said honestly. I traded ashes for gold, Elena. I'd make that choice 1,000 times over. She leaned into him, and Victor wrapped his arms around her, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. I love you, Elena said. Even though you drove me crazy. Even though you broke me. Even though loving you is probably the most dangerous thing I've ever done. I love you. I love you too, Victor said. And I promise, for the rest of our lives, I'll make sure you never regret giving me this chance. They stood together as the city lights sparkled below them, as their son slept peacefully in the next room, as the future stretched out with all its promise and uncertainty. Victor DeLuca had been many things: a crime boss, a killer, a man ruled by fear and paranoia. But now he was something better: a husband, a father, a man who'd learned that real strength wasn't about controlling others, but about having the courage to change himself. And as he held Elena and thought about Alessandro sleeping in his crib and the life they were building together, Victor realized something profound. He'd spent 3 years thinking he'd lost everything when Elena left. But he hadn't lost everything. He'd just been given the chance to find what actually mattered. And this time, he wasn't going to let it go. In the nursery, Alessandro stirred and made small sounds that would soon become cries for food. Elena pulled away from Victor with a smile. Your turn, she said. I'll get the bottle ready. Our turn, Victor corrected. Everything's our turn now. They walked to the nursery together, partners in every sense of the word, and lifted their son into waiting arms. Alessandro looked up at them with dark eyes that saw everything and understood nothing except that he was loved. And really, Victor thought as he cradled his son while Elena prepared a bottle, that was all any of them needed.
love, trust, the courage to forgive, and the strength to change. Everything else, the power, the money, the reputation, was just noise. This was real. This was home. This was the life Victor had almost thrown away, but had been given the grace to reclaim, and he would spend every remaining day of his life making sure he never took it for granted again. The storm that had brought them together had passed. The darkness had given way to light, and in its place was something Victor had never believed possible: a family, whole and healed and ready to face whatever came next. Together.